you all for being here, especially everyone who's here on time. We're gonna call this meeting to order. It's 6 p.m. right now. I'd like to also announce that the meeting is being recorded. Jonathan, can I have a roll call?
Director Aguilar?
Here.
Director Topla? Here. Director Brandt?
Here.
Director Freeman?
Here.
Craig is coming. Director Deshler has also told me that she'll be here on Zoom, but she's not here yet. And then Director Schultz.
Yeah.
All right. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Aniscoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue the tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship, support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Now, I'd like to see if there's any motions on the consent agenda. Do any directors have any items they want to pull from the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
I'll second.
All right. Can I have a roll call?
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Schultz?
Yes.
Director Aguilar?
Yes.
Director Topla?
Yes.
Right. Motion. At this time, I'd like to open up the public comment period. Any member of the public may speak on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board of directors that are not on the agenda. The board will not take action on any item not on the agenda except as provided by law. Right.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So some of the directors here know one of my biggest pet peeves in Isla Vista is abandoned bicycles. And they pose an issue, two issues actually. One is aesthetics, which is pretty obvious, very apparent. But then there's also public safety, and that's on a three-front aspect. The first front is the abandoned bike racks. They're cluttering up the racks, and people have to find alternative parking spots to the point where they're blocking walkways and entrances to buildings. And then some of those abandoned bicycles are also extending or protruding out into the walkways and sidewalks. That's a potential ADA lawsuit. And we have to watch out for that. Those are very expensive. Even if you don't lose the lawsuit, even if you win the lawsuit, it's still expensive. On another front with public safety is the abandoned bicycles are inviting people from outside of our community to come in and to take parts off these bicycles. Now, it's an abandoned bicycle, who cares, right? But then when they don't get the part they need, they see a bicycle that's not abandoned and is functional, and they start taking parts from it. And that is theft. Now, all of you that know me know that I'm not just going to propose a problem, I'm going to propose a solution. There are numerous solutions to this issue, and I would like to sit down with Ivy Beautiful and discuss them. There are stakeholders in the community and outside of the community that are willing to help on this problem. It's just going to take some coordination, some planning, and bolt cutters and a skill saw with a carbon blade. And safety gear, PPE. I gotta have PPE when we do this. But the long story short of it is that they are definitely posing both aesthetic and public safety issues. And like I said, I have all the time in the world to sit down with Ivy Beautiful and discuss a strategy and a plan to free these bicycles from their current situation. As far as some of I have documented data, pictures, and I've dated them that show some of these bikes have been in the racks for over 2 years. And that's long past the 90-day period of impounding. The other thing too, some of those bicycles are just they're just beyond disrepair. They're just abandoned, handlebars are gone. Those are obviously not ever at the point. So again, I would like to sit down with Ivy Beautiful sometime within a week or so and discuss a potential strategy and plan to maybe fix this problem, because it really is an eyesore, but it's also a public safety issue. It's one that can cost the district a lot of money, and I'd like to prevent that if I possibly did. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Any other? Yes.
I would just like to second that. We've been dealing with that through the business area mostly in the Midwest through the years. Little Miss Jenna, she is dealing with it. She probably can speak to Henry and reassure him other things are happening. One other suggestion is that when my husband and I were working on it years ago, the business people themselves were so frustrated because those abandoned bikes, like you said, weren't just there for a few months or a year. They've been there for some years. And some of the business people actually took bolt cutters and cut them off themselves because they wanted their customers to have access to the bike racks to enjoy their business. They got in trouble with the county. My husband's suggestion, which I haven't been able to persuade him, I guess, is that he said, why do they have to do so many bike racks to begin with? There's tons of them. They're close to each other. And they would just fill up with people storing their bikes, abandoning their bikes. And he suggested that maybe half of them or a third of them just be taken out. He doesn't think it's necessary that they be there. It would be a simple solution. And then the county wouldn't have to come and cut them out and store them, up at the sheriff's office. So it's an idea. But I second it. It was horrible. But Jenny,
Can I comment?
Yes.
I would love to meet with you, Henry. I have a list, actually a spreadsheet of all the abandoned bikes, or at least most of them. I've been pestering Public Works about it. They were supposed to come out during winter break, but I guess after the storm, we had a lot to deal with. So supposedly early March is when they're going to be coming out. And yeah, I would be concerned. I don't want to get in trouble by cutting them off myself, but I'd still love to have a meeting with you because this is definitely a huge issue that I've been trying to get solved. And Constance, I have been really busy, but I would love to do a further study about how many of the bike racks are being used and all of that, because I do see what you're talking about, and I appreciate that.
First of all, you have a spreadsheet too?
Yes, but please, I'd love to see yours because mine doesn't go back years. It's just recent, to hopefully make it easier for the workers to see exactly where everything is. So it's current. It doesn't go back years. So
I have the hot spots for you too. I don't know if you plotted.
I love that. Thank you. I'll get your contact.
All right, thank you for that, Jenna. Thank you for chiming in. Do any other members of the public have comments they'd like to make? Any comments on Zoom? All right, well, I will close up the public comment period, and we'll jump into our discussion action items. And as we wait for a couple of other directors to join us, we're going to jump into item 4.3, an introduction with our new management assistant, Sybil.
Hello.
Hey, Sybil.
Hi everyone, I'm Sibel and I'm the new management assistant here. So I've actually been a part of the IB community for many, many years in like different roles. I was a student at IVCSD at first, and then I was a community member. I worked for some time at UCSD later as well. And I've had a lot of other involvements with like other organizations in the community too. So this was like the right choice. Excited to be here with you.
That's good. We're glad you accepted our offer. We're very happy to have you. Yeah. Any board members have questions or comments they want to ask? No? Okay. Well, Spencer.
Well, I'll just say we're so excited to have you on the team. Thank you for being here, and thank you in advance for all of the service that you are going to do for Isla Vista, all that you've done in the past. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about like your experience and background. I just hope you did more about you.
Yes, sure. So I went to UCSD and I studied financial math and statistics there. I moved to IB like over more than a decade ago now. So I've been here like a little bit on and off, but I've been here for a really long time. I lived here as an alumna a little bit after I graduated. And then I moved to UC San Diego, to San Diego to do my master's in business analytics there for some time. And then I actually came back to IVCSD eventually, and I worked on campus. I was a financial analyst for some time, and then I've had some other things in between. And I've done other like volunteer work with, like I've volunteered with Adopted Block a lot, like cleaning the streets, and I've volunteered at the Friendship Manor some points in the past. So a lot of different things. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing and just look forward to working with you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
It's been awesome already. It's been 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
This is the third.
This is
Yes.
week 3. Yeah, so time has flown, and yeah, Shirley's been awesome, helping train, and yeah, it's been going really well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. All right, let's move on to item 4.4, an introduction with Lieutenant Slaw and Deputy Carroll.
Stand up from the shot from the back. I've met a lot of you, but some of you I haven't met in person. You've seen me on Zoom, maybe on some of the things. But I came here in October, you know each other well at this point, getting to meet Marcos. So yeah, I'm Lieutenant Garrett Slaw. I took over for Lieutenant Jared Morris back in October. Before this, I was the Central Station Bureau Lieutenant. So Solvang, Buell, and Lawful Danvers Village area was my area of responsibility. So been here, getting settled, got through Halloween. Now we're planning for Deltopia, and I'll be sitting in to listen to your plans for the spring festival here tonight. But really, there's always changes. The sheriff's department, there's always changes in Isla Vista. The biggest change that will affect the CSD is that we have seen Justin Schroeder, our community research deputy, move on as a promotion to sergeant. And so in his place is now Deputy Colby Carroll. Colby was selected out of the ranks of the IV Foot Patrol personnel. So he spent about 2 years out here already. He's about a 5-year veteran of the department. He's a field training officer. He's on a mobile field force. He's an academy instructor evaluator. He's done stints in Toledo Patrol before here and also in Central Stations. Originally from Palmdale. Got a degree in communications out of San Marcos, Cal State San Marcos, and then we picked him up when he decided to join law enforcement. So excited to have him here. He's going to be my right-hand deputy on a lot of different issues. His priorities at my direction are to expand the restorative justice program, which is our criminal diversion program, so that citizens of Isla Vista who receive a citation for low-level infractions and misdemeanors can be diverted into a class, an educational class, versus going into a criminal court. Scooter and e-bike safety and traffic safety, which involves also parking issues, all those sorts of things that are around those issues of scooters and e-bikes. And then also providing alternative and non-traditional ways to interact with law enforcement that don't involve just having to contact us on Saturday night at DP or when you need a call for service, but finding the opportunities for us to have conversations with people out in the community in an organic way where we can take the temperature out of some of the contacts with us and just help people better understand what our goals are. So that'll let Colby say a couple of words and then we'll move on.
Everybody, Colby, beginning of week 3, so it's still very new, learning a lot of new faces and names of faces. So I'm catching the grip of it. I'm excited for this new position. I'm looking forward to the new challenge and meeting all of you, working with you, collaborating with you all, and doing what I can to help support the community. So look forward to it.
All right. Do any directors have any questions or comments for the deputy and lieutenant?
I could jump into something unrelated to a comment you made, actually.
Yeah.
Didn't want to jump in public. So to your point about Public Works, I believe it's March 21st that we are scheduled to have Public Works come out to do the bike pickups
We'll have some deputies out there to help with that too, to go to the property and all that, but that is something that's in the works. But we would love to see your hotspot location as well, so that we don't miss something. Yeah, I'll give you my.
Thank you, I really
Yeah, sure.
appreciate that.
I'm not, yeah, happy to answer any questions.
I haven't lived in Isla Vista for a while, and I'm just wondering how you staff the foot patrol these days, and what kind of shifts and how many people are in the community at any time?
So staffing fluctuates throughout the week because we know in Isla Vista that we can almost guarantee when our busy times are going to be. Which probably what you guessed, on a Friday and Saturday nights between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. So we weight our staffing to that end of the week. The Foot Patrol is a very unique policing environment, countrywide. We're one of the only places where you have university police officers and the county sheriff's office working together in a very combined way. So you'll see university police officers along with deputy sheriffs walking in the area, and we may report, for the patrol deputies and the patrol officers may report to a sheriff sergeant or a university sergeant at differing, depending on the shift that they're on, and the rotations of who picks up what shift and that sort of stuff. So we very much intermingle our resources to police IV. The staffing is frankly the lowest it's ever been in Isla Vista. There's a misconception out there of a growing police presence on IV, and that's actually that's not the truth. We have lower staffing levels than we've ever had in Isla Vista. So on a Friday and Saturday night, we're not putting out the numbers that you would have seen even 3 or 4 years ago. But and that also we waited throughout the year. So during the traditional move-in time in the fall semester, we will staff overtime assignments to have more people out to introduce ourselves to the new residents and try to remind people who aren't from the area about the laws here. And then that tends to taper off throughout the year as residents get settled, get familiar with the area, and don't see those kind of typical problems that we see in early fall.
And so how many people are typically on shift on a Friday night and on a Tuesday morning?
On a Tuesday morning, you may only have 2. Sometimes that's even staffed out of Delita, depending on staffing, if there's training or any other issues. On a Friday night, you might have anywhere between 4 on a very, very low end and 16 on a very high end. But that's pretty rare to be that high. Now,
And are they all then foot patrol, or do you sometimes bring in people from other jurisdiction agencies just because you feel like you need more?
so so that would be what's called an allied agency assist or an allied agency request, us asking Santa Barbara PD, Lampo, those agencies for their resources. We haven't done that since Halloweens of like the early 10s, and only for that weekend. But on a standard Friday, Saturday night, you're not going to see Santa Maria PD walking around. It is just us. Now we bring in deputies from other stations, but they're all our county sheriffs, Santa Barbara County sheriffs. So it's all within our own police. For Deltopia coming up and for other things like that, you will see that the university brings in police officers from UCLA or Berkeley or other university UC schools to help with their staffing and augment their staff.
And because you're such a unique unit, is there a special training that people go through before they get assigned to this unit, or not so much?
No, because the training that the university goes through, well, 2 issues. One is we source our people from the same academies. So they get a lot of the same training from the very beginning already. And then we have our mandated state training that is consistent between our agencies every year that we have to follow. So our policies are pretty much in line with each other as well. So whether you're wearing a blue suit or a tan and green suit doesn't make a whole lot of difference in terms of how we apply that in the field. So there's not any specific training that they have to go through.
A question about, so you mentioned that the staffing now this has been going down. Is that due hopefully because it's safer and there's less need, or is it because of resource constraints at the county leading to trade-offs and prioritization around the allocation?
It's more related to resource allocation and the fact that we are understaffed countywide. We still see a lot of the same issues that we have typically seen in Isla Vista, and we're not spiking, but we're not dropping either. But we, along with every other law enforcement agency in the country, frankly, but in California specifically, are struggling with maintaining the staffing that we've had even pre-COVID. So as we lose people to retirement, to transfers, or choosing to take a different job, we're not filling those roles as fast as we're.
Well, it's great to see you here, and it's great to meet you, Deputy Carroll. We had coffee the other day and just got to chat a little bit about IVCSD and everything, and we're looking forward to working together and continue to work with you as well. And you know, that even what we saw right now, I think is a great example of how we can work together with the Ivy Beautiful program, or whether it's with Sydney and our communications teams pushing out information. Our staff is really a resource that I really encourage you to utilize, because they do excellent work, high quality work, and are definitely ready to help. So the question that I have, and it's a little bit piggybacks off Jay's question, or I guess at least relates to it, is because I know that there have been a lot of challenges with staffing, is the diversion component of that. And you mentioned that you're looking to expand that justice program, or the restorative justice program, which I know kind of, in a roundabout way, pays dividends when people aren't in the jail. There's more staff freed up. So can you talk a little bit about what you're envisioning for expanding that program?
Well, expanding that program actually is more of a time, or more of a resource drain on us than it is a resource benefit, because, and I can go into weeds on it if you want, but it takes, you know, 5 to 6 restorative justice classes a month that we teach, and we put on for the citizens that we write a ticket to that are RJ eligible, right? So that's 2 hours per class. It's about 10 hours. 2 deputies, that's about what, 24 hours a month that I'm putting towards the restorative justice as it is right now. We expect that we're going to have to probably double the amount of classes that we host. We want to expand this the way that we see it. The easier resource would be to write them a ticket and kick it to the district attorney and make it the court's problem. And then I don't ever have to deal with it again. But that's not my end goal. So if I was like resource depleted and I really needed to like do anything, cutting RJ would be the simplest thing to do. Not the right thing to do, but it's the simplest thing to do. Because we can just send these things to the criminal courts, they pay their fine, and we're done. Right? We don't have to put them through a 2-hour class. We don't have to do all the work that goes into all those things. We set up the class, and then all the documentation afterwards, and all the revisions of the sites and all those things. It's very labor intensive to do the RJ class, but it's worth it. And so I see the benefit in the way that we have lower recidivism when people who've gone to RJ classes. We have greater communication with people who go through them, because they actually hear from us, they see us, we kind of force them to think through some of the issues that are in IV and how they can play a part in that. So it's like an investment, right? It pays off huge in the long term, but in the short term, it's a pretty significant expense. So I don't even know if I answered your question, or if I just went off on it.
A little bit. Talk about you're thinking about expanding it. How would you be doing that? Is that adding additional charges?
Yeah, so we're looking at how can we keep the program impactful without like diluting it into allowing any crime or any infraction or any misdemeanor to be included in this group. Because to have a good class of about 2 hours, we need to keep it kind of topic focused, right? So the public safety and the immediate like personal safety issues are the ones that we're focusing on first. So we're maintaining like open container, minor in possession, those alcohol related crimes for people who live here and show a reasonable desire to like rectify the issue or understand why it might be a bad idea. Some of the bluff safety issues that might be out there, park related issues, bicycle issues. That's what we're looking at in terms of adding to what is typically there's been MIP, potential marijuana sites, open containers, those kinds of infractions.
Gotcha. And so I know that you give out a lot of tickets for things like, say, maybe a false identification or providing false identification to law enforcement officer, things like that, or those kind of type of things that are under consideration.
That is not a crime I'm considering for RJ at this point because of the severity, of potential severity of what that might entail. And there's too many other factors that go into providing a fake ID to law enforcement that I'd be comfortable making that not criminal.
Gotcha. Well, I think just more broadly for our board, we've had a lot of new board members join us recently, and this is a program that you presented to us in the past, and I think our board has gotten to learn a lot about and found very valuable. So I would love in the future, if that's something that we can work out, is just kind of, I know that it's changing, but when you come to a place where you're ready to say, you know, we want to provide this information, help educate us about how it works, I think that would be very valuable.
Yeah, we have to come back and talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you for those questions, Spencer. Thank you for your answers. Do any other board members have any questions? Before you're done, I want to open it up to the public to ask any questions. If they have any questions they want to ask of you, we're all here having our dialogue. All right.
Let's raise your hand earlier.
I can always ask the question.
Yeah,
She will.
please.
So you really do see, how do you know there's no recidivism? Do these kids really take the education to heart and go out and say, well, I'm not going to read anymore, I'm not going to have open container, I'm not going to misbehave? You have proof for that?
We do, and I don't have a number to give to you offhand, but so when someone gets a restorative justice ticket, it's the same exact ticket you already have to go to court on, right? Except that all it says is RJ instead of a referral to court. When we take those tickets, we log them, we track them. And so when someone comes back through the system, if they've been offered RJ again, or they get a second ticket, we know if they've been through before. And if they get a second ticket, they're not eligible for RJ. They have to go to criminal court. It's the same ticket for the same offense. And we see that we're not getting, we're getting a significant reduction in people who actually go to the RJ class. Much better than we are on the criminal report.
It makes sense with those low-level ones not to clog up our courts with the shenanigans of getting people out here at the lower level. I just hate to see your limited resources and people having to devote so much time to that. I wish the CSD could take that on and have educational classes with maybe just one, deputy helping run it, because that's a lot of time, a lot of resources that could be spent. Maybe helping out here.
Hi, Marcos, this is Kirsten. It's absolute, we cannot hear anything. So if a person's talking in the audience, it would be really helpful if they stand near a mic. It's just garbled.
Okay.
Well, to that point, one of the reasons that Deputy Carroll or the community resource deputy position is here is to find ways to work with the community to maintain safety, but also look for different ways of doing things. As we said earlier, sometimes the criminal court system is not the way to do it, but it's still our responsibility. So how do we navigate providing a safe, fun environment for people to live in who in theory abide by the laws, but we know that we can't fall back on the criminal court system to do it, or that we should even at times. So though it's labor intensive, it's worth every penny to me as the purse string holder for the position that Colby Carroll holds now, to emphasize that as a priority. And we see that, like we say, pay off long term, because we're not seeing them come back through the court system now on the criminal side of it. And we're getting 2 hours of someone's rather undivided attention, which is gold these days. When the average attention span is 7 seconds and they have to spend 2 hours with us, we get to really flush through a lot of the issues that they don't think about yet, being new to living on their own, living in a community like this, away from home, and get them to think about their own safety in a way that maybe they hadn't thought of before, and why it's important not to take drinks from strangers, and why it's important not to climb the fences on the bluffs, and some rather seemingly rudimentary things that just pay off, again, huge dividends, because it keeps people from putting themselves in a situation where they're not safe anymore. So I'll spend money all day long on a deputy who's not going to write a whole lot of tickets, but is going to spend time educating people, because it's worth it.
And to answer someone here, the only thing I'm going to disagree with him on so far is that those of us who've lived out here and live out here have seen a spike in crime. We've had 2 home invasions, one into my son's apartment, one into our tenant's apartment. Very scary situations. This guy's trying to get in through the window, others getting in, confronting him in the bedroom. Unheard of in the past year or so. We've been dealing with this new type of party, and I won't go into it, with several bands, tons of kids, charging admittance, outrageous, music. And we found that our foot patrol is no longer allowed to deal with it like they used to in the past. We're very concerned about the spike in crime that we're experiencing. Maybe it's not getting reported. I don't know. But she's been working on parties. It's horrendous. So maybe someday we can deal with that too and talk about that.
Thank you for your question and your comments, Constance. Thank you for answering those, Lieutenant. Do any other members of the public have questions or comments for our IV Foot Patrol? Any comments on Zoom?
No.
All right, well, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you for your time.
Interject before we finish the agenda.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if people are only having a difficult time hearing Constance. I just did some spot checks by going through the screen to try to hear him, and I was able to hear everyone pretty clearly, but interestingly, it's almost like the mic was just deciding that you were annoying. So I'm wondering if like that was a misimpression from like what I was hearing, because I was just trying to like one volume bar, trying to like not distract everyone, do this here, or if in fact people on Zoom were having a difficult time hearing everybody.
This is Kirsten, since I brought it up. I wasn't able to hear Constance. It was just kind of garbled. But I was definitely able to hear Lieutenant Tesla.
Okay.
Maybe it's where I'm situated.
Yeah, it could be the location. It could be the the echoes in the room aspects, and yeah. So.
All right. Thanks for checking in on that. All right. So yes, that concludes item 4.4. Let's jump back to item 4.1, our spring festival planning update.
Okay, let me get my share screen going. So the report that's attached is essentially the same background information as we had at our November 29th meeting, which just details the history of our district working on this issue of hosting a spring festival. The update that I have for us from the last board direction was to work with IVRPD to develop an event. IVRPD did have a meeting of their board on the 2nd to discuss Spring Festival, and there was an interest in planning and partnering strongly for something in 2024. In the meantime, I met with staff at IVRPD, their general manager Kimberly, on Friday, and we discussed what parks could IVCSD rent from IVRPD to host a smaller scale event. What our staff has been thinking, and this is just in a couple days since they've had their meeting and we've been able to figure things out. We were thinking of a smaller concept, including free food sourced from local businesses, water distribution, our safety stations continuing, and then a public art mural for people to take pictures at. Our proposal today is to have the board have an ad hoc committee that would work with us for the next 2 weeks to finalize plans, and then come back on the 28th with a final budget and list of activities that we will be able to produce in less than 2 months left until the event would be. So that's what we're asking today is seeing if this concept that's up here, that it's pretty straightforward. And I forgot to mention one thing, which is public restrooms, renting them from Marburg. So it's a more limited scope than last year from having a stage and a concert, but it's focusing on these safety essentials essentially. So.
All right, thank you for that. Do any board members have questions?
Comment,
not a question. Okay. Well, yeah. Do any board members have questions before I move on? Director Brandt.
The safety stations, will they be at Little Acorn Park and Window to the Sea, or is it just that?
We're hearing it's most likely going to just be Little Acorn Park with staffing and safety issues for CSLs that day.
For a really long time, like 11 a.m. to 2 a.m.
So almost the whole day.
Gotcha. So will there be any presence of any sort on DP? I know that traditionally this is where there's water stations.
So we'd have to figure out something else, but there won't be a safety station.
Gotcha, thank you.
And we'd have to figure out, could we rent one of those parks? So that's a process we'd have to go through.
Would we be able to just do it under the existing agreement for safety station if it was just passing out water?
Possibly. I mean, I'll ask.
I just wondered if there was some reason why we couldn't be on Del Playa.
We could, but the safety
I
station,
mean, we as a safety station.
because they have limited amount of CSOs and they're gonna already have them work for almost, over 12 hours that day. So they don't have enough to
Staff.
cover all that time at one location and a second location.
And I'll just chime in, sorry, Jonathan, but I talked to Pam last week and it's mainly because of the safety concerns about CSOs being on DP. It's not so much that they do have the staff capacity. They just, I guess in years past, have opted to just stick with Little Lake Run for safety purposes, is what I heard.
For the safety station.
Yeah, safety station, safety for safety station.
That seems unfortunate.
Do any other board members have questions? All right, well, I'll open this up for board commentary right now. Do any board members have comments they'd like to make? Director Friedman.
I'm really happy with where this process has gone. And as somebody who oftentimes when we have these discussions is sitting here kind of grumbling about things, I'm really excited by this because this has taken the directive to work with IVRPD, I think, in the right direction of if they're looking to do something potentially in 2024 in partnership, we kind of focus on that for something big. We do something small, narrow focus that won't require a lot of staff time now. That's not going to, I would expect, have anywhere near the budget that the multi-decker stage had for the concert with the television screen and everything that we had last time. So give us the opportunity to actually kind of figure out more about what and have all of our new full set of staff see what the needs of Deltopia are for when we go into those discussions in 2024. I'm happy about this because based on the concerns I had last time with relation to the description of how much staff time would go into planning full events and how we were already working our current staff heavily overtime. I like this. I do hope that when we were talking about this small event, it really does have a small budget to go with that small event. But I'm happy.
For those comments.
Or you shouldn't even say event, small set of services that are going to be provided during that day. I hope it has a commensurately small budget.
Yes. Do any other board members have comments they'd like to make?
I do when you're ready for me.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So my comment that I wanted to make is that, last year we had a nice event and it was the first event, right, of kind of the CSD stepping into this space and having an alternate event. And I guess what I think is important when you're thinking about enacting kind of cultural change is to have consistency, right? And so I think, given timing, giving staff and all that, it makes sense that the district can't put on a large event or a big event in the parks. But what I would say is that I hope that we do have a big enough footprint for this one this time, so that it does look like consistency, so that the IVCSD is providing an alternate event. And I don't think a mural and water is enough. And so because again, I think we really touted last year as being a first step into stepping into this space. And so that's my only comment. I think we need to be consistent, but I also understand and recognize the limitations. So I think having something as you've outlined is good. I maybe there's a little bit more that we can do. Harry and I are really well liked on DP. So I'd be super down to walk up and down DP with a red wagon and hand out waters. And I think that, the CSD should do that. Like if the CSOs can't do it, then, make us work for our $90 a meeting.
I love that enthusiasm, Director Deschler. Yes, do any other board members have comments? Dr. Craig?
Well, excuse me, while I agree with Director Deschler, I do think that with the challenges that we're faced with last year's event, especially with the amount of effort that we put into it, I think it's okay that we take a step back this year. And I think that one of the goals for this event should be, you know, looking at other ways and kind of like gathering as much information about how Delphi operates as possible, so that in the future, when looking at putting on bigger events, we have, you know, the right means to do so in a way that, like, you know, the community is actually going to participate in and value. And I like the idea of having like food vendors and things like that in parks. I think that that is something that really draws people in and that students will appreciate.
Thank you for those comments. Director Schultz?
I was just gonna agree with both of the previous directors. I think it's really important that we are doing something, and I also think it is good to take a step back and take inventory of what we are dealing with and how to fix it for the coming year, especially when we'll have more time to deal with it. My biggest concern is getting, honestly, like water and just at least a presence on DP to help out, because I know that is a really big hotspot for activity on Deltopia. And I think it's something that needs to be discussed.
Director Brandt?
Well, I definitely think that one of the big things that made our event successful last year was having some form of entertainment. And I recognize that we are on a really short timeline right now. We've only got a little while to figure this out. And frankly, let's be honest, we didn't know that it would take us this long to get to this point, and is a great pitch for how early we're already starting for 2024 with the Recreation and Park District and cultivating that partnership. I attended that board meeting along with Director Aguilar and Director Topliff and some of our staff to just talk about how we can partner and really make the pitch for why this is important. It's so important that we have something that can help draw people away from what's happening on DP, and every single person that we sort of divert out of that area is a win, even if it's just one person. We didn't get one person last year, we got 1,000, which I thought was a huge win. And so while I'm a little nervous about scaling back this year, I recognize we're in a tough spot given the amount of time that we have, but I would like to see something that's a little bit more entertainment-ish, if that's something that can be pulled off, just because I think that was one of the things that helped us out last year, is that when you have an act, it's not something that can just be viewed kind of passively in the way that like maybe a mural would be, or in the way that, you know, it only takes a couple of minutes to eat a sandwich, and that keeps people there for longer, which I think is really serving the core of what our goal is. So I don't know if staff wants to comment if that's something that's been considered at all, but I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, in our original proposal in November, we had different games and activities, so we could look at those again.
Are there other sorts of, I mean, whether it's music or anything like that you think would be feasible to consider?
Yeah, we wouldn't have a stage, so we'd figure out how to do something like that. But yeah, we could ask bands if they'd be willing to perform. But again, that goes into a lot of extra work when you're managing talent. That we had a Holtz consultant get paid $30,000 to do that last time. So I don't know if we can manage a whole, you know, a set of acts for the whole day like was done last year.
Definitely. One just idea, and of course, I'm always the one who's a critic of armchair quarterbacking decisions on throwing a party and party planning. But I will throw out there that, you know, vendors like the silent disco vendors, I think are something that maybe would be sort of a lower effort thing to bring in.
Dr. Craig?
I also wonder, there's a very active student band, like community in Isla Vista, and there are some like very relevant bands as well that I think, you know, if you're talking about paying them even a little bit, people would be excited to come out and see, especially for an event like Deltopia. And, you know, they're putting on concerts. Like, I know that the feedback was not positive on that earlier, but they're putting on concerts by themselves as students every weekend. And so I wonder if that's something that we could look into, and that's a way to involve students in this event as well.
Yeah, we could ask them. That's what we did last year, though.
Okay.
It was all IV bands, and we went to the popular ones, and Sounds of IV page helped us out. And so
Okay.
we did go down that route last year.
Dr. Schultz.
Just a clarifying question, is it feasible to be able to get enough bands before Deltopia?
I can answer that today. We can try. Last time we had more than 2 months. Now we have less than 2 months. So we could try though.
Although I'll just make the comment that I think our vendor was on it for quite a while, but I think they got all the bands at the very last minute. I don't think we even gave them the reference list until, so it does seem to me like that could come together. And then I'm also wondering, the Anascoya stage is out?
It's just, further, we could do that, but it's just further from the action. And we were closer last year and had, the draw we had. So I don't know if people will come all the way to Anascoya from DP, but we could do it, but it just doesn't seem like it might work. Would love to hear you.
Good, great.
Yeah, I wonder, I know when they do the Thrifttopia events in Little Leghorn Park, they have not like full stages, but just like slightly elevated surfaces that that they use for like bands that perform then. And I wonder if we, I don't know, could reach out to those organizers and see if those are available.
We could ask them if they can do it themselves too, like just
Yeah.
have their event. Yeah.
Director Freeman.
And to follow on that from that point, when Kimmy Suda and I were working on the initial like Isla Vista First Fridays events, we used an elevated set of wood planks as stages, and we had that event operating at honestly the same size, same scale as the event that we had, not the same length of time, but the same scale of people and taking over the park at the IVCSD event last year. And we were operating with essentially like a physical budget of under $500 plus the amount that we were spending for the bands. Second thing I was going to say is I don't know, do we need a motion or to direct directors Deschler and Topliff in order to go around with a little wagon?
I think that might be a motion from the potential ad hoc group. Correct.
And then the third thing I wanted is that, so after the event last time, I had spent some time talking to the police that were assigned to the area about what their thoughts had been on the event. Because of that experience, I'm curious to know, and I don't know if this law's new here, I don't know, but Kobe was his name? Colby, been here for years. I'm wondering if we're able to ask the law enforcement in a room about their opinion on what they would like to see out of the IVCSD trying to help with whatever is perceived to be the issues on Deltopia.
Yes, I would like to see that question asked. Yes.
So in terms of how we can interact with the CSD on Deltopia, again, I want to emphasize that this is very much an unlicensed street party that we are trying to deal with in constructive ways, right? And trying to provide an opportunity for people to enjoy themselves in a way that's more constructive and productive than going out and drinking on the street on Del Playa. We always have to try and strike a balance, which we don't always hit, between providing resources for people that might need them, like water and the CSO, which I think are fantastic, and then also looking like we're promoting the event or promoting Deltopia as a thing. So anything we can do to help promote and direct people to an alternative event that's appropriate and thoughtful and thought through, we're all for. How that looks in the immediate moment right now, I don't know if I have the idea, because we're usually the ones coming to you and asking for your help to do these things, like host an event. So anything we can do to support that, I'm all up for that discussion. But I don't know if I have a good answer for you at this point in terms of what we can do to help CSD during Deltopia. If you were to reverse that question, you asked me, what can the CSD do to help us during Deltopia? I'd say, can you host an event, like draw people away and maybe provide some essential resources? So you're doing this is a collaborative thing, right? That you're doing in the community. It's wonderful. We'll have our own, we're working on our own staffing for the event on our side of things, but in terms of how we can work with you, that's not a great answer, but that's the one I have for you right now.
The part you were more excited to answer was actually kind of what I meant my question to be, so I think you actually covered it.
Good.
Hello,
Right, thank you.
it's Gary Gaston, UCSB Police Department Community Outreach Team. Some of you I've met before. I apologize. I've been away for about a year, absorbed by patrol. But in regards to that last question, I saw an increase of community organizations coming together to work with police, which is really what I think is an appropriate way to police a community is working with the community. And I saw, I believe with CSD, that was putting leaflets on doors and stuff like that. So that as we go out in the streets, it was more like a reminder when we were talking to people about, how to stay safe in Isla Vista and stuff like that. So if I were to answer that question really succinctly, I would say, I really think that more of the community, people getting involved, stakeholders, CSD, people from the IVCN, all of them getting together and all of us policing together just seems to have worked really well, in my opinion. I thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. Do any other directors have comments? Director Brandt.
I have a question as it relates to the safety stations. So one of the partnerships that we explored and piloted last year that I thought was one of the coolest things we've done is the partnership with County Fire to provide for firefighter and paramedics at the safety stations. Is that something that's been considered for this weekend?
Yeah, it has. I've been in contact with Captain Safe Truck with County Fire to see if we can get some sort of resource like that. And if not, Jonathan and I also talked about a private entity coming in, but I would want to connect with them to ensure it's the right resource. That it's someone that they've either worked with in the past or that would be, incongruent and supportive of their efforts already.
Excellent. Well, that's really cool to hear. I mean, I was just blown away to see the way that those folks that were stationed at the safety station were helping people. People were bringing their friends up to them because they'd had too much to drink, or if they had a medical concern. Usually it's the opposite, where it's public safety is going out and finding people and talking to them and maybe writing them a citation. But in this case, people were getting help, and it was really powerful.
We can also, if I can jump in, as the leading organization for the response to Deltopia, we are part of a unified command with fire, and I can make that part of my official ask to them in their deployment of their personnel to include that in their staffing for us that weekend. So just to come at it from another way and ask them, to reemphasize how important that is.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that.
It's great help. Director Schultz.
Can I ask a clarifying point on that? How many paramedics or firefighters did we have on the ground last year, and can we match it this year or increase it?
Last year it was during like the move-in weekend or first weekend, and there were 2 paramedics, 1 EMT and a paramedic.
Right, do any other directors have questions or comments? Director Brandt.
Well, just say I'm really glad with where this discussion ends up. I think it was very holistic of all the different things that we're considering. This is a huge challenge because of the timeline that we have. It's also a huge priority just because of what we know this event has been in the past, and the way that, like the lieutenant remarked, it is a sort of event that's unplanned, unsanctioned, and our goal really at its core is to make it more planned and to provide people something to do that's different from what the event is now, that's safer, that's healthier. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to pull this off. I think it's also going to take our help as board members to be of assistance, whether it's with entertainment or whatever it is, but please count us at your disposal to help staff, because this is just such a huge priority.
Yeah, I want to jump in with some comments from what I've listened to so far. I'm really glad the way this whole conversation is went. I feel like we've all learned a little bit from hearing each other speak. I'm glad that we are paring back, since we are in like more of a last minute stretch. But I do agree very strongly with the idea that Director Deschel was sharing about consistency. I think consistency is very important in a community like Isla Vista. Isla Vista is known for its hard clinging to traditions. And so I think that we should continue to have a consistent activity or action going on. It doesn't have to be the same extremely large stage that we had last year. I think listening to our other directors, there's definitely potential to have buy-in from local bands, even on short notice. I'm sure more than half of the parties are not planned multiple weeks out. So I'm confident that we can get some folks to join in and help us out and take advantage of the stage or not stage. I want to open this up now to public comment before we move on to a possible forming of an ad hoc committee. Do any members of the public have comments or questions they want to ask? Henry.
Okay, so it comes down to several different factors, and I'm sure that call logs from SPSO and fire department will show. There's Tide. You're gonna see the day drinking crowd on Del Playa early in the day, and Del Playa just becomes a big wave of people. Del Playa, Sábado Tarde. Then that starts to kind of wane down, and then they start roaming into the town looking for places to eat, drink, or whatever. So the tide kind of shifts and then shifts back to Del Playa again. Then you have the most dangerous hours, in my observation of 35 years of living in Isla Vista, when music stops at midnight. But on Deltopia it's different because they have a festival ordinance, so it stops early. But you know, the most dangerous hours in my experience in Isla Vista are from 12 p.m. or 12:05 when everyone starts leaving the parties, 12:05, 12:15 till about 3:15 in the morning. Those are the most dangerous hours at night. It's where you get most of your fights, assaults, things like that. Then you've got attitude. And that mostly has to do with another demographic, which is who's local and who's not. We're concentrating on the locals. This is great. As a local, it's awesome. But the thing is that most of your people who are attending Deltopia aren't locals. They're out of towners. And therein lies a problem. Somebody mentioned about the pamphlets that were distributed. It was a UCPD officer about the pamphlet, which I thought were great. By the way, you described these are the do's, these are the don'ts. That's awesome. The thing is, out of towners don't have that information too. So this is where you get people trying to run from law enforcement, which leads to an escalation. You know, contact shouldn't lead to an escalation into conflict. Contact should not lead into conflict. But the thing is that one of the best places I humbly feel that would be a great venue to have your concert, it's closer to Del Playa, is Little Acorn Park. And you mentioned about the thrift fair. And that little stage they have there, I've seen that there. And as you know, as somebody who's played in some of the loudest bands in Isla Vista, you don't need a big stage. You just need a stage. I think it would be great if you have bands. Now, with this said, you have culture, musical culture. Most of the people that are partying in Del Playa, they don't really care about bands. I'm going to be perfectly honest about it. They like DJs better, playing reggaeton or mumble rap or something, which I just personally, I'd rather see live bands. But this is a cultural thing. You have to catch up with the times. And I think that having a DJ or a couple different DJs, you're not going to have to rely on a band last minute setup. And they require minimal equipment, and they're really into themselves and their music. So they'll go on for hours for it. So that's one aspect to consider. As far as bands go, you know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Taya Nushel, Director Nushel of IVRPD, she isn't bad neighbor. She'd be willing to round up, but she does put shows together, and she'd be willing to round up some bands if you do decide to go the band route. I think the DJ route would probably work better across the board. Like I said, on a cultural basis, modern day pop culture basis. The stage doesn't have to be a huge stage. It could be that little riser that we're talking about. Little Acorn Park would probably be your best bet. And another thing that would possibly work to the favor of IVCSD and the community in general is maybe the thing that makes Del Playa appealing is that the streets are closed, but it's not officially closed. It's this big crowds hanging out in the street and just roaming around back and forth. Maybe a street closure, like on, I hate to say this, I hate to be the promoter of this, but maybe Embarcadero del Norte on down, or maybe just closing the bottom of the loop might be favorable to getting people to the area as well. That's a far stretch. Don't quote me on this, but that might be something to consider, because like I say, there's a lot, it's a unique situation. It's very unique, it's very different. But I think it can be, you know, it can be, I don't want to use the word controlled, it can be mitigated in a manner that is constructive to the community. But there's certain aspects that we have to face realistically. One of those, like I said, most of the people attending are from out of town. They're not locals. Secondly, you know, we got to look at the different aspects that I mentioned, which are culture, you know, pop culture and the tides and times. So that's just my observation on it. I would say one of the best things to do, look at, also another thing, the time when you start getting the most medical calls is sometime around the period around 5:30 to about 6:30, 7 p.m. from my observation. You know, that's when you start hearing a lot of sirens, start hearing a lot of emergency calls. If you have pulse point on your phone, you'll start seeing all the calls starting to pile up. So, yeah, like I said, maybe checking the response logs for the sheriff's office, UCPD, and fire department might be a useful metric to establishing some sort of gauge going into it. So this is my humble opinion of this.
Thank you for those comments. Any other members of the public have comments they wish to make?
I would like to ask the board, how you justify the expenditure in the budget and the staff time to put on a recreational event. It is not listed in your activated powers granted by LAFCO. For those in the room and those in the public who are not aware of what they are, I'll read them. Number one, finance the operations of municipal advisory councils. 2, create a tenant mediation program. 3, finance the operations of area planning commissions. 4, exercise the powers of a parking district. 5, contract with the county, UCSD, or both for additional protection, police protection services. 6, acquire, construct, improve, maintain, and operate community facilities, including but not limited to community centers, libraries, theaters, museums, cultural facilities, and child care facilities. 7, acquire, construct, improve, and maintain sidewalks, lighting, gutters, and trees. 8, abate graffiti. The limitations on powers are that the district shall not supplant the level of services provided by the county or IVRPD, which is mandated to provide recreation. So I would like the board to answer how they would fit this festival under one of these powers. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Any other members of the public have comments or questions? Well, I'll try and take a stab at your question, Ms. Barbosa. I think it's a very serious safety issue that we have here in Isla Vista. Having lived through a handful of Deltopias and a handful of very bad press about Isla Vista and Deltopia, I think it would be very irresponsible for us to take no action whatsoever regarding such a large event as a community services district. I haven't fully wrestled with the exact language in the most legal, mathematical way, but I do think it's something that we should take a very serious look at. And I think that the discussion we've had so far shows that there is a very serious community concern to take a positive look and a health and holistic look at what happens during Deltopia. But I do think it's something that it would be more irresponsible to do nothing than to try and do something beneficial, than to try and do something helpful. I like to think of a metaphor of a garden when I think about Isla Vista. And sometimes there's a lot of weeds in your garden and you can spend a lot of energy weeding all the time. But if you only weed, you're left with just dirt. And sometimes you have to plant some nice flowers. Sometimes you have to plant a nice tree. Sometimes you have to plant some other vegetables to try and feed and nurture the community. And so when I think about our ideas with Deltopia, I think that we're trying to nurture the community. We're trying to nurture safety. And I think about some of our board goals relating to changing the culture and focusing on safety. I do agree that there is criticism that can be made fairly in regards to having a party or in regards to having amplified music. But I do think that there is a very noble effort behind the music, behind the noise, in order to build a safer and healthier community.
We sort of disagree on this in one respect. I think it's wonderful that the Park District and the university and everybody's beginning to provide alternative activities instead of just the drunken parties on Del Plata. It took many, many years to get that amount of involvement, and people seem to be doing a wonderful job. I think what Julia is saying here is, I think we have to be very careful that under your legal mandate, you don't just start something that you're not legally allowed to do. And the only problem with that, because I agree with providing alternatives, I love that, is that a slippery slope. If you can get away with doing something that's not in your mandate this time, where else will maybe you go? Do you have a legal mandate to provide festivals, music, and recreation? I love to see it, but she's bringing up, can you really do that? And will then you do something else that isn't in your mandate that we might not agree with next?
Dr. Freeman.
For what it's worth, speaking, of course, as always, for myself, not speaking on behalf of the board, despite questions being posed to the, to the board. When this issue has come before us before, and when we've talked about this event, I have stressed some of these same points that are being brought up by Julie in the audience here. That is one of the reasons why I oftentimes end up grumbling and end up bringing up various complaints. I also kind of add a defense to it that, so I appreciate Marcos's comment here about how if there's something that is seemingly an egregious problem, it almost seems like, well, you have to do something about it. There's actually a term for this. This is called the politician's syllogism, or the politician's fallacy, where we have the form: 1, we must do something; 2, this is something; 3, therefore, we must do this. I think sometimes we fall into that trap of, well, here's a big problem. Well, despite some of the, on the specific idea of it, despite some of the conflicts over whether it is the correct idea or not, despite some of the questions about the legality of it or whatever, this is something to do, therefore, we must do this. And that the logic does not actually lead in that way. Now, that all said, one of the reasons why I came to this meeting today happy was because it seemed like for the 2023 festival, we're not planning a festival. We're planning something that seems like an expansion of a combination of the safety stations, which is something that we're doing as under one of those powers, which is the contract for additional police protection services from either the University of California or the county sheriff's office, and the community facilities power. And we're looking at providing services and safety benefits to the community, as opposed to looking at building an event. Certainly, when we come back to this in 2024, I'm probably again going to be just as unhappy about aspects of how we could end up integrating into this, unless we let IVRPD really take the charge on that. But from the discussions that were led here from staff as far as what we were doing, I'm currently feeling okay with this, but I do want us to make certain that we minimize that budget with respect to how we do that.
Yes, $110,000.
Dr. Brand.
Money.
I just have a quick question for legal counsel. Are we on firm legal footing to be able to rent a park and throw an event? Just yes or no question.
Yeah, there's an overlap in the community facilities power that shares a lot of the characteristics of the comment about recreation. But generally speaking, yes.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. That's really the big thing that I wanted to know. I know this is something that you've looked at before. I know that I appreciate that there may be many diversity of opinions about how we can best solve these safety issues for Isla Vista. I recognize that a lot of those concerns may even go back to the founding of our district and whether or not we should exist. And I think that's fair. But ultimately, I just want to say that I'm really proud of what we've been able to do over the last year. And I'm proud of the direction we're heading. I just want to thank the staff again for all of their work in putting this together, because I think if anything, I remember what it was like before we existed, before we were doing these things, before we were working on trying to provide a safe alternative outlet. There was no one that was stepping up to fill that gap. No one would touch it with the 10-foot pole. And people would tell me at other agencies, we're not going to touch that. That's too controversial. I'm proud that we've showed the leadership to do that. And I'm really excited with where this is headed.
All right.
May I make another comment? I would
Yes,
like to
you
say
may.
that the proposal was not discussed here today. So if I didn't attend the November meeting, so it was not discussed here. It's not clear to the public that's sitting here now what the proposal is for 2023. It was not discussed. I saw at the bottom of the screen a budget of $110,000. So that the board did not bring up to the public today what it actually entails. So I don't know what it entails. And I just would like to say it's a little bit on a tangent, but Deltopia is a one-up. And so if the baseline is what's happening now, then Deltopia is gonna be more than that. If there are people on the roof every Friday and Saturday night, and that's a safety issue, they're gonna be on Deltopia, they're gonna be doing the same thing and more. And as far as safety, I don't think I've seen the CSD have a discussion about alcohol abuse that is involved in the crimes that lead to having to hire sexual assault investigators and a lot of the crime that occurs. And so I think that ignoring that and trying to put on a festival that is a sober festival might not attract the crowd that you're trying to get out of Delphia. So again, I think that even trying to get around rationalizing doing it outside of the mandate is still trying to do something that in the long run is not going to put a real dent on what Delphia is. Thank you.
And so we aren't taking action on the event budget or anything like that today. We were just updating our board on where we were thinking as a staff, and we're hoping our board forms an ad hoc committee to bring back a budget for approval in 2 weeks. So you'll be able to see one in 2 weeks.
All right, were there any other public comments, anything on Zoom that we might have missed?
Not that I can see.
Okay. Do any other board members have comments they'd like to make? All right, well, we need to consider if we are going to form an ad hoc committee to work with staff on a final proposal that we will all see in 2 weeks on February 28th. So I'm wondering if there are any folks on our board right now who are generally excited, motivated, and passionate to join on to an ad hoc committee. Dr. Craig, Dr. Scholes, Dr. Topliff. All right, well, I think that's a really strong team. So Dr. Brandt.
I agree. This is such a strong team. You're all going to do great. I know that Carrie has been assistance last year and will help bring some of that memory forward. So yeah, I think this is great. I was going to make the motion to create the ad hoc committee.
Yes, motion by Brandt. I will second. John, I think we have a roll call on that.
Writing the motion down.
The motion is merely to create the ad hoc committee, not to create the ad hoc committee and appoint.
To create the ad hoc committee specifically with these 3 directors.
It is, okay.
I think you have the appointing authority for ad hoc.
Yeah, we oftentimes do that. We just create it and then you just kind of like.
Got you. Well, yeah, I definitely would like to appoint Directors Craig, Director Topliff, Director Scholes to be on this ad hoc committee regarding the spring festival planning. And I look forward to hearing what you have to show us in a couple of weeks.
So in that case, the motion is just to create the ad hoc committee?
That's what it says. Motion to
Okay.
form an ad hoc committee.
I'll second.
All right. Who seconded that?
I seconded.
All right. Second by Topliff. Can we have a roll call on that motion?
Dr. Brandt.
Aye.
Freeman.
Aye.
Schultz.
Hi.
Craig.
Aye.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Topliff.
Yes.
Deschler.
Aye.
All right. To be clear, I want to appoint to the ad hoc committee, Directors Craig, Director Topliff, and Director Schultz. Thank you 3 for volunteering. Now I'd like to move on to our 4th item, item 4.2, the Isla Vista Mobility Plan Existing Conditions Report and Needs Assessment Report.
Okay, well, long time coming for this report. We have our consultants from KTUA, Alex and Joe, on Zoom with us. And so the schedule of the presentation is going to be Alex from KTUA will present one section, turn it over to Sydney to present another section, and then we'll turn it over back to Alex to finish the presentation and then questions and comments from the board. So, but we'll pause at the end of each turnover, see if anybody has a question, please jump in at those turnover points if you have them. So I'm going to introduce Alex and Joe. They are on Zoom with us, and Alex is going to share his screen. Alex Samarin is a UCSB alum. He's been our main point person, project coordinator on this, and Joe Ponslan is the principal on this. And so Alex is gonna turn it over to him, and he's gonna present for us. Alex, you should be able to share now.
Thank you. I was unmuting myself so I could ask.
You're good to go. Do you want me to share it, Alex? I thought you were, I think you're going to, right?
Correct. Hey everyone, thank you for the introduction, Jonathan. My name is Alex Sammer and I work for K2A Planning and Landscape Architecture. We are down in San Diego. K2A, as one of our specialties, conducts active transportation planning, and we have established and growing footprint on the Central Coast. Some of our recent clients include the counties of Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Luis Obispo, and the cities include Santa Barbara, Goleta, and Santa Maria. And we've also done work with the university. So I'm here tonight to present the existing conditions relative to mobility in Isla Vista and the needs of the community related to mobility. To do this, we assess the use and the conditions of the existing mobility environment, your sidewalks, your bike lanes, your curb ramps, how they're connected, and how safety presents itself when people use the mobility network. You know, are they safe? Do they get into collisions? Things like that. We've also assessed the community mobility needs through in-person outreach and an online survey. So first, I'll jump into how we as transportation planners view your jurisdiction, Isla Vista. So first off, it's a very small area, densely populated, as you all know. And it's relatively isolated. There's only a few ways in and out, and it's only to the north for most modes. You do have the connections to campus, but for most other destinations, you're going north. You don't go west, you can't go south. So you have these main ingress and egress points. You have a diverse population, of course, mostly students, but you also have retirement and low-income communities and families with children. So when we look at mobility needs, we want to consider all of these people. So the small area, the dense population, and the relatively homogeneous land uses really contribute to the transportation issues that we see in Isla Vista. You have dense, homogeneous residential areas. You have small commercial areas with not a whole lot of full service stores. And to your credit, you have a large area of parking open space, which is really great, not to mention the beach right there. So looking a little deeper into land use, we look at destinations, both within and outside of Isla Vista. Like I mentioned, you have small shops and restaurants in Isla Vista that support local traffic, community business and services, and local schools, or a local school for families. And all of this translates to some employment opportunities. Most people are traveling outside for jobs, errands, and school, the main things that most of us spend our day doing. Outside of Isla Vista, you'll find much more opportunity for all of those things, many more schools, many more jobs, many more shopping and services. And I'll talk about how people get there more later. So this mode share is the term we use for what percent of the population uses which transportation mode to get around. Our most reliable data source that we use in the field is from the census, and it's called commute mode share. Isla Vista far and away has a very low reliance on personal vehicle compared to all the surrounding jurisdictions and the state and the US. High adoption of alternative modes. And like I mentioned, this is only for commute, but as I'll get into the community survey data later, we see that this translates to a high reliance on alternative modes for other trip purposes. So now we know a little bit about the place and the people. Now we'll talk about the mobility network. And the foundation of the mobility network is the street network. You have 22 what are called lane miles in Isla Vista. That's just kind of setting the groundwork for what comes next. And first, we'll look at the sidewalk network. You have almost 8 miles of missing or obstructed sidewalk. That means that you're missing about 1/3 of the network compared to the road network. So 30% of the vehicle lanes in Isla Vista do not have an adjacent sidewalk, or that sidewalk has a barrier. And this is an example, the picture on the bottom left is an example of a blocked sidewalk at the end of Abrego near Camino Corto. And the map shows all the different attributes that we've mapped about sidewalks, width, and different types of barriers. Now, curb ramps are another thing that we look at in terms of mobility. They're most important for users of mobility devices. And you may not think about them in your everyday life as you move around. They're the slope surface that lead from the sidewalk to the street. There are a couple different types. Diagonal ramps, just think of it as one ramp at a corner supporting travel in both directions across the intersection. Whereas a direct ramp is kind of a pair of ramps leading one for each direction. In addition to curb ramps, you have truncated domes, or tactile strips, sometimes they're called, and these are for users with blind people, basically, who can navigate safely with their navigation aids. It helps them see the corners better. So we mapped curb ramps, and most importantly, I'd like to point out that many curb ramps around around the loop are missing truncated domes, and this is a easy fix it's an immediate need and an easy fix. I put it that way. It's a high traffic area. The curb ramps are in existence. The only thing missing are the truncated domes. Other high traffic areas we see are El Colegio. Most of the intersections have curb ramps and they have truncated domes. So that's a safer situation there. Moving on to the bike network. As we know, everybody in Isla Vista is bikes in the street and is used to biking in the street. There's very little bike infrastructure. The only Class 1 multi-purpose path is through Estero Park, and the only Class 2 bike lanes are around the loop. This has contributed to the bike culture that we all know. Some love, some hate, but it's part of life in Isla Vista. I'll add that there are ways to make it safer. Some take more width of the streets than others. Some of these improvements that could make things better take more width. Some don't take any width at all. So there's options to improve on this bike network. Intersection safety really affects all modes. And when we talk about intersection safety, it's the stop signs and stop signals. It's the crosswalks, and we map all of these. When it comes to controls for traffic moving east and west, nearly all intersections have a stop sign. So this is a fairly safe situation, but many north-south intersections do not have stop signs. And this is to support, like I said, those north-south ingress and egress routes into Isla Vista. But through public outreach, we've heard a lot of concern about those north-south intersections when people are biking across them. And as you'll see later, they really play a factor in collisions along Camino Pescadero, especially for bicyclists. And that brings me to my next point. So this is where we start assessing safety. And at the top, we see that there have been 778 collisions over about 10 years. I might add that 2021 is an incomplete year. There's some lag time in the data as it's reported and collected. This comes from this are obviously reported collisions, collisions that are reported to law enforcement. So there's some reporting bias there. A lot of people, as we've heard the community say, if it's a minor collision, get up, dust themselves off, and move on with their day. So we've heard that this is drastically underreported. The type of collisions between bike and ped and automobile, it's about 50-50. You see the blue is auto only there. But bike is a large share of that, 35% of total. So looking at some of the trends, most collisions occur on. Is there a
Excuse
question?
me, can we have a couple of questions real quick? A couple of
Thanks.
directors?
I just have a quick question. Is there data that you considered about accidents involving e-scooters?
We don't, that data is not reported.
Okay, thank you.
So there's no data source for that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Director Freeman.
This is now a couple slides old, but was the bike lane on Camino Corto, the class 2, removed? You know,
I think it's just not in here.
it was just that it was something that actually still exists, but it's just not.
I
on the
saw it last time I
assessment.
was there.
It's still there.
Okay, all right, so that seemed to be missing. And then I mean, as somebody who's complained often about the sidewalks that go in and the obstructions that are on them, the obstruction report was interesting, and yet I'm curious about the decision to list driveways as obstructions. Like I think of a driveway as an obstruction if a car is in it, and sometimes that is an issue when you're on Del Playa, but I even looked because that was right next to my apartment. I walk through that one all the time. Now that's not obstructed. If you list driveways as obstructions, you can't fix those because people have driveways unless we just remove all of the garages and everything. They're not covered parking areas. So I question the decision.
Yeah, so we did do a pretty detailed mapping of characteristics of all sidewalks. Considering something an obstruction or not is kind of a judgment call, but looking at the public outreach, we saw that there is a high occurrence of people reporting blocked sidewalks from cars and parked bikes and parked scooters. Those aren't necessarily in driveways, you're right. But another thing that comes into play with driveways is the angle at which it departs from the road. And that can be a barrier to wheelchairs and other users of mobility devices, especially if vehicles are parked right up against that. So it does limit the right of way that people have to operate off of the street. So
from the usefulness of such a report, then, is the idea that some government would go through and maybe just based on some kind of building requirement or something, require all those driveways to be graded in a different way? Because otherwise, I guess the issue is, I look at this assessment of the sidewalks, and the sidewalks in many areas look, essentially all of IV just looks absolutely horrible, but that's just, if you have a lot of houses, you will never have a sidewalk assessment that is not just riddled with obstacles.
what was the question?
I'm trying to understand it. I'll take a step back. Okay, so the goal today, right, is that we're supposed to be evaluating this assessment, and we were actually given kind of a little bit of explicit direction in order to look at what we were seeing and kind of take that a little bit. And so I'm trying to understand this driveway obstruction. Sorry, this sidewalk obstruction assessment is something that we're going to have in a report that we're going to be showing to people. We're then going to be trying to use that, and they're going to make arguments about it. They're going to say things like, "We don't really have sidewalks in IV. Look at this report; it's all yellow and obstructed." And the problem that I have is that that's normally me, but now I'm on the other side arguing that driveways aren't obstructions, right? Like if we're concentrating on the things that are actually obstructions, I'm not certain how you actually have actions on that report. And so I kind of appreciate the idea that maybe the driveways are considered an obstruction. There's certain grading under ADA reasons, but then is the point of putting those on such an assessment, on such a chart, that maybe we'd go around and fix all of them, that we'd go and we'd modify the driveway in a way where it would not be considered to be an obstruction? Or do people do that in other communities? I'm just trying to understand why the map was made the way that the map was made.
So for the purposes of this map, we can represent driveways however we'd like. The decision was made to include them under the sidewalk barriers, but they can be pulled out and included just as a driveway feature. And then it can be spoken about in text as the potential barriers that exist at those locations. The actions that are taken to remedy any potential situation at any given driveway, I couldn't really speak on, but it's that there's a lot of potential for barriers at these locations. So that's why I went through the detail of mapping them.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other
Is there,
directors?
I might ask, is there a particular way you'd like to see them on the map?
I guess the thing that I'm trying to understand is if there isn't, like, if we have not done the research to see that there is a way in which these things tend to be addressed, the issue that I have is the large amount of yellow that it ends up causing, because essentially we oftentimes have complaints people make in IB, and they're legitimate complaints. I often make those complaints that we don't have very long regions of sidewalks that people are actually able to have. And the wheel statistics get trotted out, like the number of streets that we have that don't have contiguous sidewalks. And this map is actually set up with a key that shows the length of contiguous sidewalks. And we have color coding based upon the length of contiguous sidewalks. And because of the decision to mark the driveways as obstacles, the map is just riddled with yellow. And yellow is not a good color, and yellow is saying that we don't have contiguous sidewalks that are longer than 5, whatever the unit was. I don't know, actually, I switched to a different slide now, but 5 meters or feet or whatever. And so, and I think that makes the map difficult to process and utilize for the purposes that I would expect it to have, unless there's a different purpose I don't know about. So that's why I'm asking whether there was a thought put into, oh, well, in places where, the reason why you make the map like this is because those driveways should be fixed in this particular way. And so they get queued, and there's some budget that maybe gets allocated towards it, or there's some regulation that gets changed as a building thing. But otherwise, I think that it's a misleading chart to have yellow strewn all over it with all of the littered blue. It drives the eye away from necessarily the things that are actually the problem.
Yeah, we can make it like I mentioned, we could represent driveways however you'd like. It's definitely a discussion, and I'm, as you were pointing out, some of the coloration, you kept referencing yellow. So yellow refers to sidewalks that are 5 feet wide. That's an existing sidewalk. So everything in red, the yellow color, green or the dark green is an existing sidewalk. It's the blue colors,
right.
grays and blacks that indicate missing or barriers.
I did understand that point for what it's worth. I was using that as the grading of how good that area of sidewalk is.
Yeah. So let me take a step back and say, for larger areas and where, for larger areas, we would typically just map, is there a sidewalk or is there not a sidewalk? And whether we do that for one or both sides of the road is kind of up to the client. This is above and beyond level of mapping. And it invites critique for sure. The more you represent that data, the more questions you have about your representations. We're used to that. So yeah, just to let you know, this is much more detailed than most pedestrian networks that we would map.
All right, any other directors have questions at this time? All right, thank you. Please continue.
Sure, I believe I was on collisions. So as I was saying, these aren't reported near misses. So we're missing a lot of collisions from basically those people who choose not to report their collision, get up and dust themselves off, move on with their day. Just a few temporal trends to speak about. Most collisions occur on Fridays. There's also kind of a peak that occurs around Saturday, Sunday, Monday, maybe, if you look at it in a certain way. Collision by time of day. Surprisingly, not the evening hours. It's actually the early afternoon and evening. I found that pretty surprising when I looked at it. This is the severity of collisions per type. If you think of it this way, pedestrians are the most vulnerable because they have no protection, and they may not be as maneuverable as bikes. So they have a higher percentage of severe injuries. Bikes have about half the rate of severe injuries, and autos have about half that again. So as you move from ped to bike to auto, the rate of severe injury decreases. Looking at that by mode, and looking at it both in terms of was the collision not at an intersection, or was it at an intersection, and where did those occur? You see that pedestrian collisions mostly didn't occur at intersections, but there are a few hot spots. The collisions that did occur at an intersection really concentrated, and that's around Pardal and the Ivy Loop, Barco del Mar and Del Norte. So those are some hot spots to look at in terms of pedestrian safety. Looking at bikes, you see some of the same hot spots around the loop, but also remember I mentioned Camino Pescadero that's one of those locations with fewer north-south stop signs for vehicles, and also it's coupled with these offset three-way intersections where bicyclists tend to swoop from one offset street to another, moving west to east or east to west, and that looks like it tends to cause a lot of collisions. We also see some hot spots on El Colegio, perhaps where people are crossing to get to the path, the multi-use path on the north side of El Colegio. Auto collisions are most of the collisions that are reported, and they occur in a lot of different places. It's also the one fatal collision that was reported in the data. There's about a 60-40 split where 40% occur at an intersection. So that's a summary of the on-the-ground infrastructure and how people use it, and the safety conditions in Isla Vista. And now I'll turn it over to Sydney to talk about the in-person outreach that was conducted.
Before that, I think some directors still had some questions. Dr. Freeman?
So on the we were just looking at with the collision report and the heat maps and the criticality of the collisions that are occurring on Pardal and Barco del Norte, one thing that really jumps out at me is that all of the data here has been combined together from 2011 through to 2021, which is during and like halfway in the middle of there, a street light was installed on in that particular hotspot intersection. And so the question that essentially seems very important to me is as to maybe there's just not enough data if you divide the data in half like that, because we don't, it's already difficult to make a sampling, although we have so many accidents here, it's easy to get good heat maps at all. To separate it out so we could see whether that street light actually made a big improvement to the accidents in that area, or at least that we aren't, because even here in this description of how many accidents are there, I'm like, really, there's still accidents there? I thought we put a street light in there. Maybe there's not actually anymore because we got the street light in there, and then we don't have, that's like drops out of the narrative. So. Yeah,
that's an interesting before and after. That's maybe something that we could look at and mention in the report. But if there's hot spots of interest like that, it may be worth looking at. And I might add that the collision data does report the lighting conditions. I forget which variables about lighting they collect, but think of it as lit, not lit. But even if there was even if there was a light installed, was it obscured? Did it occur in a place that was actually in the shadows, or, this is up to the officer reporting and how they choose to represent that. So, there's that part of the data, the uncertainty as well. But it's an interesting before and after.
Dr. Brand.
So I just want to piggyback on my question about the scooter share. And I understand that since this report is a draft, a report that will eventually be used for grants and things like that, I can understand if you do things in a standardized way, and I don't want to mess with that. But I also know, just from what I've seen, what I've witnessed, and what I hear from residents, is that there are a significant number of safety issues, collisions, and crashes in regards to the e-scooters. And from when I've spoken with law enforcement, they do have data on that. So if that's something that can be incorporated in the final draft, I would really encourage that. And I think we can help connect you with law enforcement to try and get that data from them, would be my guess. I'm seeing some head nods over there, but I just think that's really important. So I wanted to share.
That'd be great. The law enforcement we spoke to, that scooters were probably their #2 issue in Isla Vista, next to parking. But they didn't seem to know about any data source for that. So I'd definitely be happy to incorporate that.
Any other directors have questions? All right, well, we will continue with this presentation.
All right, thank you all. So I'm going to cover all of our outreach efforts thus far. And I will start by there. Oh, crap.
Just scroll down.
You got it. All right. So I'll just start by taking a moment to highlight some of our incredible community partners. We have the county, MTD, thanks to Hillary for being here. We've got IVYP, those were all of our sub-grantees. And then this is a list of all of our community partners. They've been honestly remarkable throughout all of our efforts. And this is a timeline of all of our work since 2021, November 2021. So I'll just paint a little bit of a picture and then I'll go into detail on some of these. But we kicked off the project in November 2021 with a virtual town hall meeting, followed by a lighting walk. And then we launched a super comprehensive transportation survey. And then for that effort, we did a bunch of tabling and canvassing. A couple key places that we tabled out were Friendship Manor, St. George Youth Center, and Pescadero Lofts. And then we held our second town hall, which was more of a workshop style. It was in person. And then we held stakeholder meetings last November and December, and then held 2 transportation pop-ups. And then we are slated to hopefully conclude with our final transportation town hall in this May. That's our goal. So essentially the goal of all of our planning efforts has been just to empower Ivy residents to identify gaps in their mobility ecosystem, give people an opportunity to experiment with solutions, and then from there develop a list of priority projects. So as I mentioned, we kicked off this project with a town hall meeting just to let residents know about the project, why it's important and ways to get involved. We had about 50 people attend, and they also had the opportunity to share their mobility experience and what their needs are and make suggestions. We also have a public comment form on our website that's available in English and Spanish that will keep even past this project. So I'll just highlight a couple of things that we heard. We can share all of these slides with you after. There's a bunch of really key information. But in regard to the bus, we heard that people would like to see the bus come more frequently and both earlier and later in the day. Some people would like to see long-term car storage to reduce congestion, but overall would like to reduce the need for a car in the first place. Attendees wanted to see more protected bike lanes, better bike infrastructure, and people shared that they wanted a complete sidewalk network, which we talked about a bit, wider sidewalks and more pedestrian infrastructure, and that there's no easy way to get to the Airbus, Amtrak, or the airport by public transit. So having a shuttle to take students to these spots every weekend and holiday would be helpful. And in regard to ADA accessibility, updated signage for wheelchair users navigating IV. So as I mentioned, we held a lighting walk. We're actually holding another one next week, but we had over 25 community members attend, a number of key stakeholders as well that supported the event. And 13 streetlights were identified for repair and 14 other areas were noted that do not currently have street lighting. So we have worked with the county and Edison to get the 13 streetlights fixed and have noted the dimly lit areas for future infrastructure needs. Then we launched a super comprehensive mobility survey at the end of March for both residents and non-residents, and it was available in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. We did a ton of tabling for the survey. So we were tabling and canvassing for about 6 weeks. We were at every event. We went to Friendship Manor, as I mentioned, St. George Youth Center, Pescadero Lofts. We partnered with IVYP to hire community outreach ambassadors to reach Spanish-speaking residents and families. Because of how long the survey was, we did incentivize with $5 gift cards to local businesses. And in looking at our numbers, it comes out to about 200 outreach hours. And our efforts really paid off because we received 1,079 survey responses, which Alex will go into more detail about those results specifically. But here's a list of all of our tabling activities. In April, you name it, we were there. And we knocked on over 1,200 doors while canvassing. And outside of the survey, I just want to highlight a couple of trends that we heard while tabling and canvassing. And those include setting lower speed limits and strengthening alternative forms of transportation so people don't need a car. You'll hear this over and over. There's a lot of trends that keep popping up. Having 2-lane bike paths on both sides of El Colegio, feeling unsafe around cars due to lack of sidewalks, and drivers feeling unsafe driving with people walking in the streets, more scooter parking, and increased beach access for wheelchair users. So then we held a second town hall in May, which was a lot more fun. We had over 50 attendees. We provided interpretation in Spanish and Mandarin, had dinner, childcare, and we gave everyone an update on the feedback that we had heard thus far. And then everyone broke up into different table activities. So here's just a couple of photos from that event and a couple of things that we heard. Like most people feel more comfortable biking in car lanes because the bike lanes in IV are so narrow. And then what was fun about this event is we got to talk about more solution-based response as a group by mode of transportation. So things like increasing capacity of bike racks on the bus or allowing bikes on board the bus. Shuttles to grocery stores and shopping centers, and parking permits to limit cars, bicycle signals at intersections and no parking signs along the bike lanes, stop signs at T intersections, parking solutions for skateboarders, and crosswalks with audible crossing notification and signage for destinations. So then it was time to put what we heard to work and put it in action. So we held 2 sustainable transportation pop-up events, one on Pardal and one at Camino Puerto and Abrego. We chose these locations based on all the feedback that we heard. And the Pardal one was probably one of my favorites because we put in temporary traffic installations. And then prior to the event, we educated residents on what to expect by tabling a week before and leaving signage out so people kind of knew what to expect. Here's just some photos of the traffic installations, some of them that we put in place. You'll see the marked crosswalks, bike boxes. There were also sharrows and scooter corrals that are now permanent. And then we had tons of volunteers out that day asking for feedback and encouraging people to take our survey for that day. We wanted to know people's thoughts on each of the individual installations. Did they make you feel safer? Do you want to see them permanent? Things like that. It was available in English and Spanish, and somebody won a $100 gift card for participating to the co-op. Again, I won't go into all of this, and Alex has more data, but a little bit of info about what we heard that day. So for the most part, all respondents felt safer with each of the traffic installations. You'll see a few people who did not feel safer based on what mode of transportation they were using that day. For example, 4 pedestrians did not think that the bike boxes improved safety, and the only driver to respond didn't think that the bike box should become permanent. But of the 121 survey responses, people overwhelmingly agreed that these improvements should become permanent on Pardal as well as elsewhere in IV. And most respondents agreed that the demonstrated features improve safety and traffic flow. So our next pop-up, as I mentioned, at Camino Corto and Abrego, was focused on families walking to Ivy Elementary School. And we asked what safety improvements they'd like to see in and around this area. We also chose it because it is a safe route to school, but there's also a bus stop near the intersection. So we asked questions about that. You'll see that this bus stop is not ADA compliant, and there's, yeah, there needs to be a sidewalk extension here, which Hillary's very aware of. And there's a scooter in the middle of that, and people parked in the red. We also saw people parked in front of fire hydrants, all kinds of stuff happening there. And the activities at this event allowed people to write their ideas on sticky notes, vote on different improvements using stickers, which the kids really loved. And all materials were available in English and Spanish. And we had Spanish speaking volunteers throughout the event as well. So we had volunteers here, and then we also had volunteers stationed at the mid-block crosswalk in front of St. George Youth Center on Camino del Sur. Here's just a couple more pictures of the activities. We had opinion polls, voting, and recorded convos. And some general trends and suggestions. I think this event honestly came up with some of the more creative ideas. One of them being to put the power lines underground to make room on our already narrow sidewalks. We heard over and over how unsafe people feel at this intersection, so more enforcement and cameras were highly requested. A solar powered speedometer to show drivers how fast they're going down Camino Corto. We heard a lot about a diagonal marked crosswalk because that's what people are doing already. So might as well make it safe. And then in front of St. George Youth Center, a stop sign before the mid-block crosswalk, or at least a speed bump to slow down traffic. I will say we were out there for probably a total of 8 hours, and there were a lot of near misses in terms of cars hitting pedestrians, cars hitting bikers, or any which way. It was crazy. So through the winter, we invited residents and non-residents to participate in virtual stakeholder meetings to talk more about their experience. So the goal really here was to listen to groups that have not been represented and heard from it during the previous outreach events. So we held 14 stakeholder meetings over 2 months. And lastly, as many of you know, I'll just highlight all of this work was acknowledged by the CSDA. We were awarded the 2022 Award for Exceptional Public Outreach and Advocacy. So as you can see, we've done a ton of different outreach and engagement activities through this project, really just trying to ensure that all voices are heard. So I just want to give a big shout out to our community partners for their continued support, and to Fiona, who couldn't be here today, but she's done such incredible work, and I'm super grateful for her. So I will answer questions, but I'll also turn it back to Alex to finish his presentation.
Any directors have questions? Well, thank you so much, Sydney. I was lucky to attend one of the, I think it was the May outreach event, and there were tons of people involved and tons of new solutions, as well as honest voices and honest complaints heard and spoken. So it's clear that our outreach team did an excellent job. I'd like to hand it back to Daniel for the rest of the presentation. Alex, sorry, excuse me. Hand it back to Alex for the rest of the presentation.
That guy. Here we go. Just a second. All right. I might close out Sydney's part of the presentation with saying the amount of outreach that Isla Vista has done, led by Sydney and Jonathan and everybody who's helped them, is really unparalleled. And I think it's a huge factor in winning the Caltrans ATP grant this last year. The need is obviously there, and the outreach just backs it up. So, and this online survey was just a small part of that. It was almost 1,100 responses. About 75% of that were Isla Vista residents. But I do want to caveat that with, even though it's a large sample size, it's not, it wasn't conducted in a statistically valid manner. This, wasn't sent out to a certain portion of the population that matched these characteristics and those characteristics and make sure we got a certain sample size. It's still a huge effort and a huge accomplishment. So, and this online survey is just a small portion of everything that's gone on. So I'll jump into it. So we had about 1,100 responses to an online survey that was meant to assess travel behavior characteristics and both inside and outside of Isla Vista, issues that people observed within Isla Vista and how they thought it could be made better. Large majority of the responses were from UCSB students, of course, but we also had a good number of responses from parents with families, long-term renters, homeowners, faculty, and staff. So we did get that, that cross-section of the Isla Vista community. And I might add the bottom pie chart here indicates that for the about quarter of the respondents who were visitors, and this includes UCSB students living on campus, I might add. Very few of them come to work. Most of them come to eat, socialize, or sorry, the rest of my graph is blocked right now. Do everything but work, eat, socialize, and recreate. So a little bit more about respondent characteristics. We asked the question, do you have a personal vehicle? And to be more specific, if you're a student, not just do you have a personal vehicle at home in your hometown, but do you have a personal vehicle with you in Isla Vista? And the breakdown is roughly 60% of the respondents have a personal vehicle. Why? Why do they need a personal vehicle? To get groceries or just for general convenience? Those were the top two reasons. The next reason was to drive home, and then a smattering of reasons beyond that. And looking at why that 40% chose not to have a personal vehicle, the first two reasons were cost related. And then you have the younger population who don't have a driver's license, but it's really impressive to see that people would rather use another transportation mode other than driving, or walking, biking, using the bus. So that aptitude, the propensity towards active transportation to alternative modes is very high in Isla Vista. That's great. So looking at the general transportation trends, these are what we call external trips. So from Isla Vista to other places. And those other places generally are other places within Southern Santa Barbara County or outside of Southern Santa Barbara County. So you can see, obviously, personal vehicle was high in both cases. Shared modes came next, the bus, carpool, train. So there's, and not just, it wasn't car and then a huge gap and then all these other modes. You see a consistent use of all these other alternative modes, consistent high level of use, which is really good to see. And this is kind of just a follow-up question to how do you get to these other uses, the airport, the train. The intuitive answer here is that most people use Uber, Lyft, Get a Ride. That might place some importance on pickup, drop-off places, a designated trip, pickup and drop-off locations in Isla Vista, maybe, micro transit, getting to these specific locations at certain times, things like that. So continuing with the external trips, the important external trips to capture are work, school, and errands. So that's what the next set of slides cover. Most people who responded worked on the UCSB campus or other places in Southern Santa Barbara County. So you see, because they're relatively, UCSB campus is right there, walking and biking were high mode share, followed by personal vehicle. And again, bus was very close to all of those. You'll see bus be a very important mode next to all the other ones that you think of as, you know, the walking and biking being very important. Bus is right next to that. And here's an example of it. How do you get to school? Walk, bike, and bus. Personal vehicle could be a mix of Santa Barbara City College students. It could be the parents and students taking their kids, the parents taking their kids to school, or it could be those fewer students who drive to class occasionally. Here's the grocery shopping and other errands. Most people go to Camino Real, right at the corner of Stork and Hollister, or stores and businesses in Isla Vista. That covers the majority of responses. Now, how do they get there? Here you'll see car be the most important one, most important mode, followed by walking and busing. You'll see bike really drops here. And in some of the written answers, we saw, well, I walk to the store most frequently because I only go to the store in Isla Vista. Or it was I bike or I drive or I bus to Camino Real because I can't bike back with everything that I have to come back with. So it's really a kind of a utilitarian reasons for what mode you take to where you need to go. So looking internally, these are trips just Isla Vista to Isla Vista. Obviously, the more easy accessible modes, walking and biking, are very high. Bus somehow was mixed in there. Doesn't make too much sense, but I think the emphasis here is walking and biking. And of course, I do want to point out, we did make sure to get responses from those people who used mobility aids, in addition to covering all different types of scooter modes, skateboard modes, electric or manual, personal or not, that sort of thing. But those are all very small mode share. And if in the survey, if you answered that you walked in Isla Vista, you were given a set of questions relating to pedestrians. If you answered that you biked in Isla Vista, you were given a set of questions that related to biking. Generally, for all modes except for bikes, we ask about sidewalk issues. For all modes except bike and vehicle, we ask sidewalk issues specifically and safety issues separately. So here for pedestrians, you'll see that the top reason, top issue is the lack of sidewalks. And the top safety issue is not enough street lighting. Looking at the safety side of things, you'll see that the next three are all related to car behavior, not road surface, not lack of safe crossings. It's not feeling safe around cars. It's the vehicles don't stop at stop signs, or people speed and drive kind of crazy. So those are important to consider as well, and may come into play at intersections or mid-block. Looking at mobility device users, intuitively, their top sidewalk concern was that sidewalks are not wide enough. And then the second issue was also related to width, that scooters and bikes are parked on the sidewalk, reducing the width. So those are the top issues for on sidewalks for mobility users, mobility device users. And then on the safety side, a mix of things around cars and intersection safety and not feeling safe traveling in the street when there is no sidewalk. Just kind of there's a low sample size here, but still some of the main issues come across as, not feeling safe around cars, placing importance on the need for sidewalks for these users. We asked these questions of skateboarders and scooter riders, but we do have to caveat this with, it's technically not allowed or encouraged to skate or scoot on the sidewalk. But we know it happens, so we asked about it. The top sidewalk issue. There's cracked or uneven sidewalks, and again, missing sidewalks or sidewalks that don't connect. And on the safety side, high vehicle speeds, kind of getting at that need for separating the uses, maybe create different facilities, designated lanes, something like that. Also point out that not enough street lighting pops up as a main issue here as well. Now, for bus riders, we ask slightly different questions. Is what issues do you have with bus service? And then specifically, what issues do you have with the bus stops? The top two issues with bus service relate to the frequency and the directness of routes. Sorry, that's the top three. It wasn't frequent enough was the top reason. The next two related to the timing and the directness. And then there are some issues with capacity and just how long it takes to get places. On the issues with bus stops, we ask this question a lot when we work with in first mile, last mile plans. We typically see a high demand for more seating, more shade, and more lighting. Those are typically desired by bus riders, makes waiting for the bus much more comfortable. I think importantly, we have to point out here that there was a large response to more bike parking at or near bus stops. And what that would do is enable more multimodal trips, where you could, instead of showing up at your at a bus stop with a bike and having the bike rack be full and not being able to jump on the bus, you'd be able to park it at that bus stop and get on as a pedestrian at that point. So that's an issue that bikers see when they try to ride the bus. Now, we asked a different set of questions of bicyclists, but this first set was consistent with everybody else because bicyclists are so often in the street in Isla Vista. Vehicle-related issues were the top two. Vehicles, erratic driving behavior, and they don't feel safe around cars, and also just the thought that there's not enough bike lanes or bike paths. So we followed that up with agree, disagree scale for certain questions. Most bikers generally agreed that there are not enough bike lanes or paths in Isla Vista. There's not enough bike parking, and the public bike parking that is there is not secure. So that's a need when it comes to mobility for bikers. So we've heard a lot about on the ground infrastructure, how people use it, what they think about it. Now, how do they think we can improve it? So when it comes to roadway and path improvements, the top three identified improvements involve mode separation. This is your pedestrians saying, put more sidewalks in. This is your bicyclists saying, give us a multi-use path or something that just separates us from traffic. After those priorities, two of the next three involve slowing down other modes. So that involves traffic calming, maybe more, like I mentioned earlier, the need for stop signs at intersections, things like that. So those are the top roadway and path improvements. For intersection improvements, the top three really involve what we would generally call pedestrian visibility. It's improving marked crosswalks at intersections, installing flashing lights in some form to let drivers know that there's someone there trying to cross the street, and also just safe points to cross the middle block. There are some long blocks in Isla Vista, and even though it's pretty customary to walk in the street where there is a sidewalk, maybe think about logical locations to place mid-block crossings. And I'd say the next priority after that really has to do with ADA accessibility, more curb ramps and raised crosswalks. That kind of speaks to the ADA mobility. as does the next priority, more time to cross the street at signals. So some people may need longer time to cross El Colegio, for instance. So I think this is my last slide. The top 3 desired improvements for bicyclists, scooters, and skateboarders. So this question was asked of all people, all residents, whether or not they biked, scooted, or skateboard. So it's kind of getting out of your lens as a pedestrian, thinking about, well, how do I want bicyclists to behave? How do I want scooters and skateboards to behave? And the top 3 issues really involve mode separation. It's again, the bicyclist saying, give us separated bike lanes so that not just the bicyclists saying this, it's the pedestrians, it's the drivers, it's the bicyclists, scooters, skateboarders saying, you know, separate bikes from traffic, or give us something that we belong in. More parking and for bikes and scooters, skateboarders also important. That would help with maybe help with the issues that we see with overcrowding on the sidewalks. And then, of course, traffic calming is typically a important identified issue as well, and we see that in the number 5 identified improvement was slow cars down. So with that, oh, sorry, this is my last slide. The looking broadly at alternative transportation, this is where bus comes back into play. What improvements would really encourage you to encourage or enable you to take active transportation more? The top 2 had to do with frequent and direct bus service. Bus was always in there as a 3rd or 4th important mode when looking back at other questions. So how to make that more accountable and more a speedier mode of transportation? It's really, those are high priorities for your community. And then 4 of the top 7 involved safer paths or routes along major roads, with the top being Stork Road. And you know, that's a major connection getting to Los Caminos, Camino Real. And finally, I want to point out that, you know, we've spoken a little bit about street lighting here, and it was a top issue identified by pedestrians in the survey, and it shows up here as a top improvement for encouraging active transportation. So there's many ways of looking at all this data, and we've chosen to kind of focus on the takeaways of each question and focus on the answers given by residents. But it's a very rich data set. So if you have any questions about how we could slice and dice that, I'll do my best to answer. But for now, I'll stop screen sharing.
All right, thank you for that information. Do any directors have questions they'd like to ask? I see no questions. I'll move on to comments. Do any directors have comments they would like to make?
Well.
Dr. Freeman.
I actually have a question. I don't know if we want to do this, but I actually have a question for Hillary, who happens to be here, and it was about something that was in the report, not a bad thing. It mentions it mentions this new micro mobility service called Wave, but it doesn't really explain much about what it is, other than that it's very tight, curb to curb, on demand ride sharing service. But I didn't really unpack that.
Sounds great, right? Yeah.
Sure, and I can answer that, and I got public comment too after or whenever you get to that. But to answer your question, so for the record, Hillary Blackerby, I'm the planning and marketing manager at Santa Barbara MTD, and yes, referencing microtransit. So it's something we've actually had planned for about 3 years, but for some reason, the past 3 years, some stuff has gone on. If you've noticed, this sort of stopped things in their tracks. We've currently waiting to get enough
bus operators. We've had a shortage to start the service. But essentially what it is it's flexible on-demand curb-to-curb service within specific zones and at specific points for a flat fare in a shared electric van operated by MTD operators who are background checked and trained and all that stuff. And so we're really excited about it. The zone can be found if you go to sbmtd.gov/thewave. But essentially, there are certain points like pick up and drop off points, and then specific zones, mostly in Goleta, but there are points in Isla Vista. One would be right out there in the community center parking lot, one on El Colegio, two on campus, and then serving the airport, the Goleta train station. So a lot of those things, people saying, we can't get there, we have to take Uber or Lyft. It would cover that. The airport, the train station, and then over at in Goleta, up above, like the Kyriel area, so I think Trader Joe's, Bath & Beyond, Sprouts, that area up to Cathedral Oaks, over to Patterson, and then to the west, Los Carneros, and south of the freeway. And then another little polygon on the map is south of the freeway. All that newish housing around Los Carneros, Goleta City Hall, the business park. So all those spots, you'd be able to order a ride from a smartphone app or by calling the transit center and say, I'm here, I want to go here. Say, okay, your ride will be there in 7 minutes, right? So sort of a public shared Uber or Lyft type thing in a specific zone, and how this would benefit from that. And the way that those zones and locations were arrived at is what we've heard over the years, obviously, from where people want to go, right? People going, I want a 1-seat ride to Trader Joe's. And so this would get you that, right? So that's the idea of it. And I think it will fill some of those gaps. And we're hoping to start it later this year. Yeah.
I think one thing that was kind of a goal of this needs assessment was to be able to provide input towards services like that, services like the bus service in general, groups that have tried to put together similar things with associated students or other on-campus affiliated services. And I'm wondering whether or not you feel this assessment has succeeded in being able to be something that can inform MTD on its operations.
Good question. So I'll say, first of all, and one of the things I was going to say in my public comments is the outreach and the work that staff has done is, it like almost brings a tear to my eyes. It's been so incredible and so impressive. I've gotten to be a part of all the meetings, public meetings, the pop-ups, all of that. And it's been, Isla Vista is my favorite place in the world as a former Isla Vistan and someone who lives still in the broader community. And I'm not surprised that the community responded the way they did when asked questions about this thing that impacts people's everyday life, right? In very significant ways. But the work that's been done by the team, Fiona, Sydney, Jonathan, is honestly incredible. You see it from the survey results, but it's been, I think, a community building exercise, honestly. So what I would say is the outreach has been incredible. The data you're getting is incredible. The needs assessment needs a little work. You see in all the data from the community, saying a lot of stuff about the bus, right? Obviously other modes as well. In the needs assessment and in the existing conditions, let's say, there's a bunch missing on transit, right? It mentions one line, obviously there are 4 that serve IB. I think some more descriptions could be in there. In my experience, doing a lot of government grant writing, if it's not in your plan, if it's not in your existing conditions, it doesn't exist. No one's gonna fund it. It doesn't matter, right? So I'm committing to helping flesh that out a little so that we show the full picture. Because people, when you at those meetings, that first meeting, there was a Zoom meeting, people wouldn't shut up about the bus, right? So, which is great, because obviously it's a big part of their life. So I think that's one of the things that needs to be fleshed out. It's really useful for us as another special district, fellow special district, to work together with CSD, and it's been a really good working relationship. To get that input, right? We do our own surveys, but we don't get 1,000 responses, right? So It's really useful. We just finished a short range transit plan. It's kind of a 5-year plan. Some of this has informed that. And yeah, I think that constant feedback loop is going to be useful for all of us.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there's seemingly ample opportunity for collaboration that's already happening there and will continue to happen there, and that improvements will be able to be made to this document in order to try to shore up all of this information about bus service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Topliff.
I guess I had a general comment about the organization of the report. There was a lot of wonderful information in there. I liked the pictures. I liked a lot of the tables and the graphs. It seemed like it was way too long. And in my mind, a lot of the surveys and that information could have been appendices. And it seemed like all that information was feeding into existing conditions. And so there was a certain amount about existing conditions, but it wasn't informed by all that data gathering we did. And so I felt like the existing conditions were kind of thin, and they weren't at all, there was kind of like no value statements about them. Like, you know, this is unusually bad, or, you know, we need more of this, as is evidenced by all these comments we got. So they seemed just, you know, sparse. And then there was so much, you know, data from the input we got. And it was, you know, a little different here, a little different there. And it was just kind of overwhelming to try and go through it. So it seems like the structure could have been different. So it was more like an executive summary of the findings.
Thank you for those comments. Any other directors have comments? Director Brand.
Well, I just want to second the immense admiration that I have for our staff for all the outreach that occurred to make this happen. To think back to when it started, it was 2021. We were still in the throes of the pandemic. We were utilizing Zoom for public outreach, which I participated in a lot of meetings on Zoom, as we all did during those years. It was a lot more difficult to really build those connections, but you managed to do that. You managed to host amazing pop-ups that I know a number of us attended or gave surveys at. I'm in so much admiration for you, Sydney, and Fiona and Jonathan and everyone who has worked on this, because it really is second to none. And the proof is in the award. So just a huge thank you to all of us, because it's incredible. And it was really informative to see all of the different data that we gathered through the surveys. To me, the thing that stood out the most was on page 94 and 95. I think it's like figure 20. Can you pull that up? Whoever's got the slides, the figures like 20 and 21. I can do it.
This one?
I can't see very well.
This is the Camino Real one?
Yes, yeah. So both of these graphs just show the ways that people get over to the marketplace and to other marketplaces to go and get groceries, to buy things from retail. And there was another graph earlier on in the report that talks about that's the #1 reason that people say that they have personal vehicles in our communities, to go and get groceries or go and get retail goods like at Target. And I think that I would really like to see in the recommendations some analysis of that goes beyond just the transportation side, that also goes to what can we do as a government agency to advocate, and what opportunities do we have to try and support the other side of that, which is bringing more of those services closer to the people who live here, so that we don't even have to go that far, so that we can use the modes that people use in Isla Vista, that they say that they use when they go to the food co-op or to the market, which is walking and cycling. And I think that we have an incredible opportunity with timing with the Ocean Road project that UCSB is undertaking, which we will have a retail component. And I think that as Hillary mentions, it's one of those things where it's really good to get that stuff in the report to show that there is a nexus to transit and to, you know, meeting all of our goals to make it easier for people to get out of their cars, and that is a point for us trying to pursue that or advocate for that in that project. So that's something that I would like to see. I don't know if it fits in because I know that a lot of the improvements we ask about are very specific to like modes of transportation, but I think that it'd be great to see that in there. I mean, I have tons of thoughts, you know, just about so many different trends and stuff that I've seen here that it's so cool to see visualized. But I'll let others speak and just listen because I'm really confident that within the data that's been collected that that we have, you know, a lot of, I guess, collateral to be able to you know, implement things when we do go out and use this report to try to get grants. Because remember, for the board, that's exactly what this is for. This is, you know, our statement of why we should get a grant whenever we apply for something. And it's just so well put together. So great job.
Thank you for those comments. Any other directors have comments they'd like to make at this time? All right. Well, I'd like to open it up to the public to share comments or questions they might have for this report so far. Henry.
Okay, so as a scientist, engineer, I love thermal graphs. Gotta go with Director Freeman on this. I love those. And they showed some really interesting points of contention on there. One of those is on the intersection of, it's a T section of Los Carneros and El Colegio, and there was a hotspot. You can see it on that thermal graph. There's a couple of reasons why it's a hotspot. As far as bicycle versus vehicle accidents, a lot of it has to do is people are going eastbound on the bike lane on the ocean side of the El Colegio, and some cars will turn into Friendship Manor. I actually had that happen to me. I was on my way home to go join an IVRPD meeting. I got hit by a car. The only thing that saved me was 50 years of BMX racing skills. Then there's another aspect too. People riding bicycles and e-scooters on the sidewalk. There was one particular incident where a gentleman in Friendship Manor, 82-year-old guy, he got hit by a bicycle. It was a hit and run. Guy hit him and took off. He's now permanently damaged. He lost a lot of his freedom. That's something you can't give somebody back. I mean, you know, his name's John, and he's really emotionally shooken up about that. One of the problems that you have, and you have this on other aspects of my list, is people going the wrong way on bike lanes. In a matter of 3 days, I had 3 near misses leaving my apartment in Segovia. I turned right, and luckily, the way we do it, Kim's on her bike, and I say, I'll cover for you, and I'll go in front of her, and I'll turn right on Camino del Norte, Marco del Norte, and here's a guy coming right at me on an e-scooter. Oh, you want to play this game? All right, let's go. So then there was a guy on a bicycle, actually 2 other guys on bicycles, 3 nights in a row, 3 nights in a row. Then you have El Colegio, you have Embarcadero del Norte and Pardal. And most of the accidents that occur there, they're not bicycle and car. They're bicycle on bicycle. I know, I've actually been a part of those just recently, a couple of those. And again, 50 years of BMX racing saved my life. In fact, one guy just ran the red light and I hit him. And I go, you realize it had the green? He goes, yeah. I'm like, so now another thing too is bicycles going onto the roadway. And skateboards too. And by the way, I'm an ex-pro skateboarder too. So I do both modes of transportation. And one of the things is the shape of the bike lanes, the condition that they're in. You know, like for example, when you get to the crosswalk over by where Taps and Tacos used to be at, there's a huge, and also on this side of the road, there's a bunch of huge divots. Again, BMX racing saves the day for me. But people that don't have those skills, what they do is they just avoid it. They go right into the street. I've seen them nearly get clipped by cars in that process. Same thing with skateboards. Skateboards, you're not going to make it over those things. But it's the condition of the bike paths, or bike lanes. I'm sorry, bike lanes. It's the difference between a bike path and a bike lane. If you go to UC Davis, you'll see their bike lanes are groomed to where it accepts both bicycle and skateboard, roller skate, whatever mode of transportation you want to use. It's not a car. But UC Davis is a very good system for that around town. I've actually skated around it and everything. It's actually very heavily patrolled. If they catch you doing any tricks in the bike lane, you're gonna get a ticket. But it's not the idea of riding a skateboard. You know, another thing that was brought up in the survey was the time that accidents occur. And it's usually the times that I notice that accidents occur is like the hours that people are going to and from campus, which is from 8, 9 in the morning till about 6 at night. And, you know, I sat there in Dublin's having a beer, you know, like, oh, boom, all of a sudden you see a T-bone occur or somebody slide into another person. One night we were on our tandem, we even saw this one young lady, she was coming in hot on Pardal, just coming in hot. And we had the green, we were going up in we were going northbound in Embarcadero del Norte, and there was a car behind us, and I kind of like looked over my shoulder just in time to see her just clip. First of all, she went on the wrong side of the road and she T-boned the car, and or like, you know, the poor young woman inside the car, she was shaken up. I had to like get her out and just calm her down. It took me like 20 minutes to just get her hands to stop shaking. The problem is you have these people running the red light. Now, on the topic of e-scooters, I'm going to go one even crazier for you. E-skateboards. Now, e-skateboards, it's not a question of collisions. The problem that you have with e-skateboards is you have people who have never had the opportunity to go fast on a skateboard. Now you've given them the capability to do so. So this is one guy, and I'm sure, I think we talked about it, but we call him the sitter. I'll sit there in front of Sam's to Go having a beer at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Or, you know, when I was working, I wasn't having a beer. And here comes this guy down Pardal, just sitting yoga style on his skateboard. It's about this high off the ground. Well, not this high off the ground. He's this tall. Now he's a low profile vehicle going at a high rate of speed, zipping through bikes and everything. And he runs that red light all the time. He is who we call the sitter. He's popular. I think I just popularized him on Zoom right now. But these are the issues that you're facing. People going the wrong way on bike lanes, bike lanes that are kind of damaged and they force people to go off to the side. People without the previous capability to go fast on a regular vehicle going on to a motorized vehicle and creating a hazardous situation. These are the challenges you face. Another hot spot was Picasso and Embarcadero del Mar. And the reason for that, lighting is one of the contributing factors, but the other one is, again, people going the wrong way in bike lanes. And another issue that you have is cell phones. People and this is one that I see on the corner of either Embarcadero del Mar or Embarcadero del Norte and El Colegio. They push the crosswalk button and you're waiting to turn and they're sitting on their phone and then they start running across. They don't know whether they want to walk or stand there and answer the latest text on the latest drama. These are the challenges that you face. They're more human-induced challenges than they are vehicular-induced challenges. But, well, they are vehicular because people are in vehicles. And one last thing I want to add is with the wave thing, it's a great idea. I think that you should also have a service that goes to Santa Barbara Airbus because a lot of students do take the Airbus to go to LAX. So that would be a potential stop along the way. So those are just my observations on that. But thank you, Jay, for pointing out the thermal graphs. I'm a big fan of those as well. I've done many of those in my job. So that's basically it. And the e-scooter thing, e-skateboards are also a big concern. So just throwing those factors out there.
All right. Thank you for your comments, Henry. Do any other members of the public have comments? Hillary.
Yeah, thank you. I said most of what I was going to say, but just want to, thank you all for your partnership and for all this rich information, right? Unlike any other place, Isla Vista is everyone's like, you've all seen it, like whatever the condition is, thousands of people have witnessed it and experienced it. So that's why it's really helpful. The other thing I would say, just sort of generally, and as a kind of active transportation advocate in my own free time, the fact that you have this data now, it can't be ignored. And all of these conditions that have just been described and that are described in here, I would posit that any other place, we'll just keep it to California, but any other place that has as high a mode share for walking and biking as Isla Vista, in proportion to the amount of walking and biking infrastructure you have, is outrageous, right? And honestly, a miracle that that heat map isn't just burning up, right? And so what I would say, you know, from special district to special district, you don't control the right of way for the most part, and we know who does. And you're gonna have to be aggressive and put it out there, go after grant funds, but show that there are conditions that are unsafe in this community, and you deserve a safe, safe infrastructure, right? Because people have figured out how to exist here and live, right, for the most part. But it's just kind of amazing that it happens the way it does. So I'm personally committed to helping get this, you know, have Isla Vista get what it deserves as far as infrastructure goes, but making sure that you have all of this really good data. It can't be ignored. When everything was just anecdotal, it's like, well, yeah, but this and that. It's really, really important that you have this and that you come out of this with a really sound plan. And so I think you're on your way. And would just say too, some of the engineering, none of these problems are, Isla Vista is special and unique, of course, but none of these problems are like things that engineers don't know how to fix, right? It exists, it's totally possible. It's been done in other parts of the South Coast even, right? And so there are ways to do this. Some of the bad behaviors you see, people going on sidewalks traditionally, people are biking or scooting on sidewalks. It's not necessarily because they're just bad people that don't care. It's because they don't feel safe or they don't have another place to go, right? And so it causes a lot of problems when you don't separate modes. Obviously, the data is showing us people know what they need. They need to be safe and separated. So I think we're on the right track and look forward to seeing the next phase. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Any comments on Zoom?
No hands on Zoom.
All right, well, I'll bring it back to the board just in case there's any further comments they want to give to our partners at KTUA about this existing plan conditions report, needs assessment report. Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to add? Dr. Toplip.
Well, I did just notice that, you know, there's a certain amount of typos and, you know, problems. So I presume that we're still in a draft form and we're going to give it a better look. And then the Isla Vista history thing I felt was too sparse, and there was no mention of the civil disturbances of the 70s, all of the community organizations that grew out of that, the trial report that was done at that time about the neglect from the university and the county on the community. And then also there was nothing about the longstanding attempts towards incorporation that have been made in the community. So it just seemed like that really is part of what informs how the community is these days. Even I understand that the reason the streets don't all go through is because there was such police brutality during the problems in the 1970s that they were chopped up so that the police couldn't just rampage through the streets. So there, you know, there's stuff that I think just should be part of how we got to be who we are.
Those are very important comments. Thank you for sharing. Do any other directors have comments they'd like to make at this time?
This
Director
is
Brandt.
okay. This is Kirsten. Just put me in the queue, please.
Okay, Director Brandt, then Deschler.
Thanks. I was just going to ask, I don't know if this is for our staff or for KTUA, but can you describe what form will the recommendations come in? Will they be like policy recommendations, like it should be our policy to do this? Is it going to be specific like infrastructure or
project program recommendations, a combination of them?
We typically focus on infrastructure recommendations, but we can also include policy recommendations.
Great. Well, that's really helpful to know. Like I mentioned before, I know that some of the things that we maybe bring up may not be traditional in terms of what usually gets put in a plan like this, but also in a lot of ways, we are a non-traditional community and we use these documents for more than just going out the grant and getting the grants, as I think you've heard tonight. It's advocating for ourselves. And so I would love to see some of that, the things that we mentioned in there, if there's a way to incorporate them. So thanks for working with us and entertaining our creative ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Director Deschler.
Hi, the comments I'd like to make is first, it was really, there's a really good data in this report. And I just, to all of those who had a hand in getting good information, doing the outreach and putting together kind of this first draft of the report, just a huge appreciation. I can see this being used on campus. I could see it being used to inform other conversations that are happening on other issues. So I want to just say, Alex, to you and your team, and to Sydney and the group that she's set up to kind of do the outreach, and to Hillary the Great. Always nice to have Hillary on our side. It's just I just want to give a huge appreciation. And then my only comment is I'm not sure, and I think that Spencer asked the question that I was going to ask, is that how do we take this data and really make it a little bit more richer in terms of creating a narrative? And that's what I would like to see developed. I'd like to see you, Alex, and your group at K2A really add some of your considerable expertise into really giving a little bit more meat to the report, and so that we can really see different options that we have, and how the more meat, more information you can share in a narrative form, I think that it will help us when we're meeting with the county, when we're meeting with the university. So really good data, and a really good first start on kind of understanding the data and synthesizing it. I would like to just see a little bit more from that on some of the summaries that you did. Thank you, though. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I think that might be enough commentary for now. Is that useful?
Second that.
Are those comments useful enough? Oh, okay. He's muted. Okay, well, I'm gonna assume that that's enough comments. Thank you for providing that report and listening and hearing us out, all of us. And now we'd like to take a break, just to give everyone a little breather before we move on to our next set of discussion and action items. So it's 8:42 right now. Are folks feeling like a 5 or a 10-minute break right now? 5. Okay, we can return at 8:47 p.m.
Please, if that last bit was directed at me, yes, it was enough.
And for everyone in the room, I know it's late, but I brought cupcakes, so please take one.
I had that really.
from Isla Vista as well. Then we have the food drive, which Carly from the Compost Collective did an amazing job with last time. So here's just some incredible statistics. So typically more than 1 million pounds of material are collected during move out every year. That's crazy. So pre-move out. So what are we going to do to try to mitigate this? There's a few different things I would love to try. So pre-move out would be February through roughly the end of April. First, of course, education. We want to help residents acknowledge that move out's coming up really fast and that it not only benefits themselves, but the environment if they can just start to prepare early. So below I list a few things I would like in our educational material to serve this purpose. I have a list of storage facilities that I'd like to share with residents, remind them to bring items home early and provide statistics like I just did with you about previous move outs. They're all listed right there. So, but that is something we'll be doing is educational outreach. And then I don't know if you've heard, but we're having a community-wide yard sale. And my goal with this is just to encourage residents to start getting rid of their unwanted items super early on. So this will be on March 11th. And something so exciting is there's this woman who puts on these amazing art markets, makers markets. And she's amazing at advertisement. She's known all throughout Santa Barbara. So at the same time this community yard sale is going on, she will be putting on a maker's market here at the community center. And because she's so wonderful at outreach, we're expecting a really big turnout. So already we've had 29 people register a sale. This includes homes and people who are just going to come sell here at the community center because maybe they don't have a yard, and 70 participants because each sale that's been registered, like there's multiple people in each sale, not every one of them, but sometimes they sign up and they're going to do with their friends. And we've only started advertising like last Thursday. So here is the flyer we've been using. Next is an item collection service. So we're going to try this out and see how it goes. I want to have residents sign up to have their unwanted items picked up from their doorstep. And the goal is to, or the idea is to have them put the items on their doorstep, say every Thursday from 1 to 4. And then they sign up on a Google form. And then my workers will come and collect those items on the e-bike. So of course they can't be too big of items, but hoping this will help get unwanted items out before move out time. So next is move out, which is May through the first half of June. What are we doing for that? More education. So what to expect during move out, as well as providing resources. A lot of it will be repeat information from pre-move out, but it's a little bit different. So we want to collect and hand out boxes because this is something that was done last year and it was very popular. I would love to collect from local businesses because I know that there's so many leftover boxes, and also go through the streets of Isla Vista. I'm always seeing boxes there too, and then pass them out during move out time to residents. Another idea we have is holding an unwanted item collection drive in Isla Vista. So when Viviana moves all the unwanted items from the give sale to Embarcadero Hall, and this year it's going to be June 14th when all those items get there, and she has Embarcadero Hall for, I want to say, a week. That is when Isla Vista residents can come donate their stuff. But the time before the 14th, it's still move out time, and there is nowhere for residents to bring their stuff in Isla Vista. So if we use the community center as a space for that before they start collecting from the gift sale, that could give people the opportunity to put their stuff somewhere other than the street or the trash. And then, of course, the Compost Collective, Food on Wheels, Carly alone collected 2.3 thousand pounds of edible food, which is incredible. And this is something she's going to be doing again this year. So another thing we really want to do is help with give sale operations. Two biggest issues right now are the lack of volunteers or labor, and also nowhere for leftover furniture to go. So I explained this a couple meetings ago, but Goodwill will take all of the leftover stuff from the gift sale, but they're no longer taking the leftover furniture. So that leaves all this furniture that's pretty much just going to end up in the trash. So we want to, first of all, recruit volunteers and provide help from our staff at the give sale, as well as hopefully find a way to store leftover furniture over the summer for a welcome sale in September. This is something I find very important because we want to be recycling these items back into the community, and it's impossible for a lot of people, like I said, to benefit from the surplus of unwanted items when they don't have anywhere to store it over the summer, or they have a lease gap. So here's the plan: storing items over the summer. So we can rent 2 of these huge marboard containers. When the give sale is over, we could put all of the leftover furniture that is not susceptible to mold into these containers. So then, to have diversity, and we don't have to do this, but if we want some diversity for our welcome sale, and we also want to have items that are susceptible to mold if stored, such as clothes, we can rent 1 pod for a test run. We pack it all up just like a mover would. If someone's moving out of their house, they would use a pod, and then we put it into pod storage. So it would be in a climate controlled environment and hopefully not get mold. For the marboard containers, options for storing these. So these will not be inside, they will be outside, although they are completely enclosed. And I've seen them in my previous job store furniture for months, and the furniture was fine. So one solid option is there is an empty lot on Cervantes that we can for sure rent out, and I've talked to them about it. They said it's okay. Most likely it would end up being $2,500 a month to put 2 to 4 marboard containers there, which this time we'll probably only want to be using 2 containers for our test run. But there are other options that we haven't looked at yet, but we will, such as other landowners in Isla Vista who may be willing to let us use their space for that time. So backup, we can always rent out that lot for these containers. And then labor, we will need some labor to help us bring the furniture from the give sale when it's over to the marboard containers. It's going to vary on where the containers are going to end up being located at that time, but roughly $1,440 if you're hiring a crew of 2 people in a truck for the whole day. So the end goal would be to have this welcome back sale. So full circle in September during when everyone is just moving in. It would be kind of just a big deal. Food, I'm hoping to have vendors who sell sustainable or secondhand household and personal items. So all with the theme of everyone's moving into their house and we want them to buy sustainable things in the first place, selling back the items left over from the give sale and move out is obviously the whole purpose. Also, an educational aspect of encouraging people to buy secondhand and just beginning right then and there to remind them of move out. That's months from them and then, and also have programs tabling like we do anyways. So that's like the big goal. And then here is a budget broken down. So it would be a total of $12,600 for everything I talked about. And then it lists some of the plans I have that are just being funded with the existing budget. So last are just a couple ideas for the future. And one of them is we could hire workers for say 7 days, 8 hours per day to collect usable items off of the street for the give sale / summer storage. Now this would leave us with like even more of a surplus of items than we'll already have from the give sale. So maybe we want to wait on this until we try this summer storage idea to see if it works before we do something this big of scale. Also, an idea is to order several pods and offer a service where multiple people can utilize the same pod for personal summer storage. So we like divide up a single pod, just helping, because usually someone can't afford one pod. One person can't afford one pod, but 4 people can all pitch in for one pod. So that is it for now, and I'm going to continue working on it, but those are all the ideas that are currently in motion. Well, the end part isn't in motion. I'm presenting it to you, so. But thank you.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. That's an amazing report, something a problem I hear about a lot from my neighbors on 6A blocks. I'm really glad that you're working on new and creative solutions. And some of them are not necessarily new, but they are very useful and very Isla Vista. And so it's incredible. Do any other directors have questions or comments they'd like to share right now? Director Brandt.
Well, I agree that these are incredible ideas and they are ambitious. And I think that's why I really love what you're doing with this, because this is, it's above and beyond what we usually talk about in terms of, you know, just identifying the problem and complaining about the trash that's on the street and saying, how can we make sure that that stuff doesn't turn into trash to begin with? And I think that that is, you're totally on the right track. The question I have, maybe this is more for Jonathan. So what's the mechanism for us doing a sale? Like how do we do that? Do we have everything like figured out to be able to do that?
We still have to figure out the mechanism. We've got 8 months of a lead time, so we're focusing on the things that are happening now. But yes, we'll get it figured out.
And it gotcha. Yeah, that just struck me as something very new that we'd be doing, and I'm sure that it's something that can be figured out. But I love the idea too of just thinking outside the box and saying, well, we want to store all this stuff. What we should just rent a plot of land here in Isla Vista. I love that you've been able to forge that relationship to where that's an opportunity. I don't think that's anything that we've ever talked about at the board level before. So kudos, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Any other directors have questions? Dr. Craig.
I will say, excuse me, while I'm super enthusiastic about the idea of the storage containers, I do think we might want to hold off on the pods just because, like, from what you've told me, like clothes and items that could mold are things that are still accepted by thrift stores in the area. And also, like, there is a risk of those items molding, and the pods are a lot more expensive than the storage containers are. Like, if we could do 3 storage containers instead of 2 storage containers in a pod, we might be able to store more furniture instead of clothes and just, you know, kind of see how that goes. first before trying to dive into like the clothing pool. Plus I know that there's like a lot of secondhand clothing already cycling around Isla Vista, and it's really hard to like go through those items and see like what we want to like keep and try and sell and what like it should just be trash.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when I talked with Viviana, who runs the give sale, she said that she doubts we'll need more than 2 Marburg containers for the amount of furniture left over, but it's also super hard to determine that. And if need be, we could always last minute order another one, and they are low cost. So the pod would just be if you wanted to put out money for that as a test run. But I agree, it's not completely necessary because those items can go to Goodwill.
Dr. Freeman.
This is quite possibly a question that can only easily be answered by doing it and seeing what happens. But I'm curious, it feels like it's possible to estimate in some way. So maybe either you or Viana have put some thought into it. Might not be in the unit I'm about to ask the question, but maybe that unit's not that difficult to convert. But so let's say we get one of these containers and we fill it full of the unused furniture, and then you're gonna have a welcome sale. A welcome sale, people are gonna come and they're gonna buy things at the welcome sale. What are the $1,000 spent on the container? Are we talking about then it's storing hundreds of dollars worth of stuff, thousands of dollars worth of stuff, tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff? Like what is the like amount of money that people are going to be coming and buying? Do we think? Well, maybe it's from one of these containers.
That is a great question. When I asked Viviana, how much do you have left over? She said, it goes from 20 couches to nothing at all, but it leans way more on the side of having a lot of furniture left over.
I mean, if you filled up one container full of couches, how much couches is that worth?
That she keeps track of is how much money she earns or how much money she makes, and I'm sure that she has all the details about like how much she made from furniture. So we could look at those numbers. It wouldn't give us necessarily the most accurate, but I mean, if anything, I'm sure she has that information. So I would be happy to ask her for that, and we can look at it and decide what we think. What happens if we can't resell or get rid of the stuff in the fall? We just like well, it depends if Goodwill would be willing to take it off our hands at that point. They're not during the actual gift sale during move out, they're not willing to take it because a lot of it is, you know, within your line of this size. But so while people that some people wouldn't want it, I know that there are a lot of people during move out who would want it. So chances are a lot of it would get shown. But during move in, there's not going to be hopefully as big a surplus of items coming in Goodwill as there is during move out. So I don't know if they would be willing to take those items that they don't take during move out during move in. But if we are able to sell them, hopefully we can give them away, or else they go to the landfill. So yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty confident though that we would be able to not really base off of anything except for the fact that I personally would always see things I wanted during move out, but I couldn't take them because I didn't have a lease for another 3 months. So I'm pretty confident that we could sell them, but that's a great question for sure. I don't really know yet.
this conversation makes me wonder about, the time before the potential welcome back sale in which folks do initially move into their apartment or house and then they're most desiring of a couch. And I'm wondering about like a special early bird sale of some kind for folks to move back and what that could be, or what number of neighbors might want to just merely store their furniture rather than get rid of it and then rebuy it or someone else rebuy it. And where we might need it, maybe the gift sale doesn't need because people don't necessarily want to part with the furniture, but their struggle is to find storage. And I'm glad that that was one of your very early goals, was to educate folks on the different storage options. But it makes me wonder that neighbors might ask for a different service from us, which is just to store their stuff, but then never relinquish that possession of the item. And yeah, it's a complicated experiment. I'm really proud that you're working on it. Yeah. Any other directors have questions or comments? Dr. Brand.
Two quick things. First, you didn't mention, or if you did, I missed it, but I'm sure you might be thinking about it. Just fumigation for bed bugs for doing anything with furniture, and making sure that when you talk to property owners, they're aware of that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, can you talk a little bit about, so just like the response of like your regular crew when it comes to like what we see in terms of like overflowing trash cans and things? I know historically during move out, like we're going to try and get all the stuff that would otherwise be contributing to that's good, whether it's furniture or clothing or items to the gift sale, but there is just generally going to be more waste. Do you just have like thoughts or ideas about or plans to just respond when those exist? Because I know that in the past, like you've been able to, like, even just taking pictures of those when they're happening can be really helpful. Is that something you're thinking about?
I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. That's something that we do regularly just to monitor overflowing trash cans in general. So definitely during move out, we will want to do that and gather as much data as we can to use it in the future. The only thing that I can think of doing is just hopefully having a crew that can work during that time to help pick up trash that isn't in the trash can. And Marburg, they'll be out there constantly. I don't know details about their service and whether or not having more of that service would be beneficial. But I could really just think of Marburg and my team going around doing general litter pickup. But that's great that you brought that up because that's something that I'll think more about. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, one thing we've done in the past is we would take the pictures and then let the county code enforcement know so that they could follow up with the landowner. It's like one time there was a massive trash pile up on Embarcadero and DP. And the county code enforcement, after I had called him, he came in and forced the property owner to take care of that pile themselves too. So we've played that role.
I'd make a motion.
All right. Yes, let's hear what your motion is.
To approve a budget of $12,600 to be used, not necessarily exactly how you laid it out, but for this project, which I think is wonderful.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Topliff, second by Craig. I'd like to, real quick, before we approve this budget motion, open it up to the public just to make any comments before we.
I could clarify what the no motion was. Does it include that not that I disagree that the service is wonderful?
That it was include that.
It does include the service is wonderful. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, any members of the public have comments on this motion?
First of all, thank you for what you're doing. And Jonathan, another one of those trash piles is the one at 6555 Segovia. I remember reporting that one to you. Woo! Anyway, couple suggestions on this. Number one, I gotta go with Director Craig about the pods. I don't think you need the pods, but there is a way to prevent mold from those containers. You go to Ace Hardware and you get a product called Damper. It's calcium chloride. It's what saved the Apollo 13 crew from dying in space because it removed the moisture from the air in the capsule. That stuff, you put a couple buckets in there and I guarantee in a couple days, if there's any moisture in there, you'll see it build up. Dump it out, reuse it again. It's reusable compound. And you can store it and save it for the next year. Another thing I'm going to suggest, this is something that when I was running for the 2-year seat, maybe at the end of the year, CSD might want to consider having a shredding service available for people to get rid of sensitive documents. Now I'm going to say something. My 35 years living in Alta Vista, I have never paid for a piece of furniture. It's all come from the voluntary gift sale. It's more the take sale. It's just, hey, come on, we're out of this. But one of the most alarming things I saw last year was Kim and I, we rolled up in a dumpster across the street from us. She has a floor lamp fetish. I don't know. But anyway, there was a bunch of sensitive documents on the ground. There were canceled checks with bank account numbers and signatures. There was all kinds of pay stubs with social security numbers on them. There was perm number. There was transcripts from campus with perm numbers. The last thing anybody needs to start their new life graduating from college, aside from $50,000 to $80,000 in college debt, is now identity theft. So maybe we may want to consider having a shredding service available at the end of the year as well, that people can take your sensitive documents, shred it, we're done. As far as this being an experiment, it is a great experiment. My mom, the mom of a scientist, the saying that I always go with my mom that my mom uses on is, well, there's only one way to find out now, isn't there? And this is going to be one of those there's only one way to find out moments. Another thing I have to add too is there is that piece of property behind Esper's Auto. I don't know if he owns that piece of property. I'm pretty sure he does, but you may want to talk to him about that. Would be a closer proximity to the give sale to store the stuff, the containers or the big bins, store them over there across from Woodstocks. If not, check with UCSB to at least put those bins on the Embarcadero Hall property itself. So those are just some options that I thought I'd throw out there for you. I don't, like I said, I'm not sure who owns that piece of property over there, but it'd be worth checking out because it would definitely reduce the amount of travel and human power needed to move stuff from point A to point B. So just my suggestion on that. But the dampering idea, it definitely removes the possibility, the necessity of having to get those pods. Pods are expensive. Those bins aren't, but the dampering will definitely make a difference. And the bed bugs, yes, definitely have to check for bed bugs. So that's just my take on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other comments?
Yeah, there's one in the chat and I'll read it for him. It's from Arthur Kennedy. And he says that we should encourage landlords to allow selected non-junk furniture to stay in their rental unit from lease to lease.
All right, thank you for those comments. Now I'd like to bring this motion back to the board. We had a motion and a second, and it seems like we have good confidence for this. So Jonathan, can I have a roll call vote?
Wait.
Director Dessler has a comment. You have the floor.
I think I might be double talking, but listen, I have comments about this, but I think that I need to abstain from this vote. And the reason is because I am an owner of a storage facility in town. So I think that I should not be voting on this. So I'm going to just abstain.
Good idea. Good.
That is a good clarification. We appreciate that. Now, may I have a roll call vote?
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Schultz?
Yeah.
Director Craig?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Hoplet?
Yes.
Deshler's?
Abstain.
All right. Motion passes, one abstention. Now let's move on to our.
Can I put in one more plug for anyone that may be watching either in here or on Zoom that you are hiring?
Oh, yeah, no, I was gonna mention that, but yeah, I am hiring. I Live Vista Beautiful is hiring. And we have some good applicants, but accepting applications till the 20th. Thank you. Yeah, $17 an hour.
This is a very good plug. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to our final item, 4.6, reasonable accommodations policy.
Great, so you have the staff report, the resolution and the policy all bundled here together. Ross, his office put this all together. It's to comply with the new law that was signed into law. It's a new policy that was signed into law in 2022, AB 2449, says for us to have a reasonable accommodations policy. Some of this we already did, but we're enshrining it now in a policies. You wanna comment?
It's just often an overlooked part of AB 2449, which was focused primarily upon having some alternative remote participation option other than the teleconferencing provisions under the Brown Act as they've existed since 1974-ish. But there was a concern during AB 361's life of remote meetings about whether accessibility was being respected. And so the authors of AB 2449 made sure to include the requirement that a lot of public agencies were already following. As Jonathan said, as a customer practice, this simply says thou shalt enshrine an accessibility policy. And this policy is consistent with AB 2449 and reflects what we are doing for all of our public agency clients.
All right, thank you very much for that quick update, Ross. Do I have a motion to approve this policy?
And the motion should be to approve resolution 23-2.
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 23-2.
I will second it.
All right, motion by Brant, second by Craig. Are there any comments on this item? Any public comments on this item? None? Okay, Jonathan, can I have a roll call?
Yes, Dr. Brant?
Yes.
Beeman?
Yes.
Schulz?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Topliff?
Yes.
Deschler?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Dr. Brandt.
But before we leave this item, is it possible for us to get a presentation about the new AB 2249 regime for how things can be done with teleconferencing? I know just with talking with some board members.
It's confusing.
And I sat through like three of them and I still don't get it.
Yeah, honestly, it's going to be one of those things that until we actually do it, it's probably going to remain confusing. If you've ever busted out a new European style board game and you're like reading the directions, like, how do I play this? Until you actually start playing, it's not really going to make sense. But basically what 2449 boils down to is the laxness under AB 361 is gone. And there was some discussion about trying to enshrine a lot of that flexibility that public agencies used during that time, provided that there was a way for members of the public to participate meaningfully, audio, visually, et cetera. This district has been doing this for quite a while now in a hybrid format. So it's never really been a concern here, but for other agencies. Civil liberties groups were concerned that having just, kind of going along with AB 361 would deprive the public of the opportunity to come and talk to their representatives face to face. They wanted to not have it be so easy. So essentially what it comes down to is this. You still need to have a quorum of the board present. If you are going to be absent, you have to have a good reason why. It can't just be for a matter of convenience. It has to be for some type of a personal medical emergency. You don't necessarily have to state what it is, or you have to be a caregiver for someone else and they're having some type of an emergency, or you're going to be out of the area on business for the agency on which you serve. That's really what it is. And the number of times that you can invoke a remote participation is limited to, it's like 20% of the meetings for the year, not more than X. If there are Y number that you have in the year, there's a formula for it. So that's essentially what it is. A little bit less restrictive in some ways than the teleconferencing provisions, but certainly more restrictive than what AB 361 allowed for during the pandemic, in recognition of we've basically moved on from that emergency footing.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it'd just be helpful for us to get an idea of what our obligations are as board members for when we need to invoke those certain things, if we are going to be remote, and for us to have an idea of when we can't do that.
Yeah, as a practical matter, if it's an emergency situation, just contact me and Jonathan, and we'll do everything that needs to be done. Because there are ways to qualify for not having to disclose where you are if you're in a private location. But if you are in a private location where there isn't some type of privacy concern, that information is listed on the agenda, which is similar to when you are appearing under the teleconference provisions under the Brown Act of having to be in a publicly accessible location, having the agenda posted, et cetera. So again, if it's something that can be foreseen, or even if it's on a short-term basis, you contact me and Jonathan, we'll make sure that the agenda reflects all the information it needs to, and that you have the information that you need to in order to attend remotely. If you're out of the area on district business, we're going to know ahead of time. And so it'll be pretty easy to implement. Those are really the primary use cases that you're going to encounter. And we'll keep track of how often you're gone to make sure you don't hit that 20% or 6 meetings in X, whatever it happens to be.
All right, thank you for that explanation. Now I'd like to move on to item 5, our reports. 5.1, reports from members of the board. Any members of the board have reports they'd like to make? Director Freeman.
On February 27th is the chapter meeting of the Santa Barbara local chapter of the California Special Districts Association. Will not, as I previously said, it would likely be at the residence inn in Goleta. It will not. It will be at La Bote Bistro in Buellton. People who wish to attend that. Although I'm not certain if you received a notice about that, Jonathan.
No, not that I can remember.
Okay.
I usually remember. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a small possibility that Craig will point out that, well, if we didn't notice it to anyone, who's going to show up and it'll randomly get canceled. But I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that they're just going to notice it.
All right, any other members have reports? Director Brandt.
Myself and Jonathan, as well as Jordan Killaroo from Supervisor Kathy's staff, attended a town hall meeting that was put on by Santa Barbara Hillel on February 2nd. This was in response to the hateful anti-Semitic flyers that were posted around Isla Vista the day before, and then there was a second round that happened that night. There were representatives there from UCSB, from IV Patrol, UCPD, from the Anti-Defamation League, as well as probably about almost 100 students that were in attendance. It was really powerful. And I think that it's just important that we as community leaders really stand up and say that hate has no home in our community, that we unequivocally condemn these anti-Semitic acts. They're hateful, they're bigoted, and that's not what our community stands for. Our community stands for love and inclusivity, and we won't tolerate that. So I want to thank everyone on our board for signing off to the statement that was put together. And we had a number of other elected leaders from the Santa Barbara schools and others. I think that while words cannot necessarily help rectify a situation, what they can do is draw attention. And we heard that loud and clear from the students and from the Anti-Defamation League representative about calling out these things when they happen unequivocally. And I'm happy that we could help to do that. And I'm also happy that we were able to share at that town hall about the planned third safety station, which is in partnership with Santa Barbara Hillel and will be stationed there, and have a little bit of just good dialogue about the community service officers being a resource during that time when people were feeling unsafe. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for that report. Thank you for attending and helping with that cause. Do any other members of the board have reports they'd like to make? Well, I'll try and keep my report kind of short. I attended the February 9th IVCN meeting, and there I got to hear from many different members of our community. I got to hear from Jordan Killebrew about things happening with our second district supervisor. Ms. Capps will be coming out to Isla Vista this week, either Tuesday or Thursday. I know that we have a meeting, me, Carrie, and Jonathan have a meeting with Supervisor Capps on Thursday. I'm thinking about a fun name like Lemonade with Laura or Kaja with Capps. And it's a total open invitation for folks to get to know our district supervisor and help voice some of their needs and important desires for the community. The Board of Supervisors also dealing with a 30-day period of hearing public comment on a housing element, and they're asking that folks please submit feedback. There will be a public hearing at the Board of Supervisors meeting each week, and that it's all in regards to the crisis in Santa Barbara County revolving around housing. But our district office is sensitive to where we build. There are tons of open lots and ag lots available, but we are not looking at those spaces for first choice. We're looking at spaces that already have infrastructure, including areas like the Magnolia Shopping Center, looking at what infrastructure is already present and getting rid of any, and without getting rid of any businesses, we are considering how to infill and utilize empty spaces. Again, this is coming from a state mandate, so this is a very important community housing element that we all have stake in. Also, there are a few different websites and areas where we can send the feedback via email beyond just attending these meetings. So if folks have questions, please ask me and I'd be happy to connect you with that information. Also, the Goleta Beach will partially reopen, including the parking and barbecue grills, but repairs are still being done, as well as emergency beach operations are still happening. There will be large moving trucks going back and forth. So that bike path that goes downhill right there will still be interrupted on a need-to-know basis. So please be safe when traveling to that area. And also the people in the community who wish to check out Black History Months happening in Santa Barbara County, please visit juneteenthsb.org. And if you would like to be added to the Santa Barbara County District 2 newsletter, please let me know and I will give you that contact information. It was good to get to meet everyone on the IVCN meeting. It was my first time attending, and I know that I'll be able to have a better ear to our community and what's happening in and around the neighborhood with this meeting. That concludes my report. Now I'd like to ask if there's a report from any standing and ad hoc committees. We just heard from the new formation of our Spring Festival ad hoc committee. Did anyone else have, any other committees have things they need to share? All right, seeing none. Is there a report from District Council?
Given the hour, I'll be brief. First, welcome to Director Schultz. First time being in person meeting you. I'll make sure I give you my card before I leave, so you know how to get a hold of me for any legal questions you might have about being a director. I've been keeping all of the clients that we have up to date on AB 361. That's on schedule to be no longer available once the state of emergency is lifted on February 28th by Governor Newsom. That's one of the conditions that has to be present in order for AB 361 to be used. If for some reason it is extended, or if another emergency is proclaimed related to COVID or some type of health crisis, RSV has been going around, then that would make AB 361 available again, but it's only available through the end of the year, automatically sunsets end of 2023. Just anybody who's curious, the federal government's COVID proclamation of emergency or state of emergency will be rescinded, at least at this point, on May 11th. Again, keeping track. The mobility plan, I know, is a very important part of what this board is trying to accomplish in terms of some monumental change in the community. And from time to time, I get asked questions about, what does that mean? And what about risk? And what about liability? I do want to just briefly remind the more veteran members of the board and to bring up to newer members that sidewalks are one of the primary areas of risk management. People trip and fall on sidewalks all the time. They claim that there's a lift, and when there really isn't, there's nothing there. And so that is something that when you're looking at how to attack an obvious problem, I'm a resource that's available to give you ideas on how to manage that risk over time as you put in more and more of the sidewalks. Keep in mind too that curb ramps are an ADA requirement, and they are technical in how they are, what they have to achieve. But I think that Hillary, I think Hillary was great in mentioning that they are relatively standardized. There are no problems in Isla Vista that are unique to Isla Vista when it comes to mobility. So you're not going to be reinventing any wheels as you attack this problem. But it will require a lot of interagency cooperation. People forget that the district is not a city, so we don't have all of the powers that are available to a city or to a county. And so a lot of the right-of-way is owned by different agencies, and under 61250, we have to get their cooperation in whenever we're doing anything. And that includes when you're putting in curb ramps. The consultant talked about marked sidewalks. Remember too that there's such a thing called unmarked sidewalks. And just because a crosswalk, I'm sorry, not a sidewalk, crosswalk, the marked crosswalks and unmarked crosswalks. It doesn't matter if it's marked or not. If you have a prolongation of the sidewalk that connects a path of travel, there's a crosswalk there. And there are specific requirements that apply, which means getting into the road, which means coordinating with the right county. So there are a lot of moving parts once you get past the planning stage. So know that I know this stuff. People, my firm know this stuff. I was telling Jonathan that I worked with 5 developers to do about just short of $100 million worth of ADA improvements through a number of settlement agreements for one of our clients. So this stuff is top of mind for a number of our agencies, and we've got a good team of people who are ready to help implement whatever policy decisions you all make. So I bring it up not to scare you. I bring it up to say, go in eyes open, but know you've got a team on the legal side. We know these issues and we know how to help you navigate them. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question that I'd like to ask Ross.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Ross, so can we assume that when there's a policy coming before the board, that you've already reviewed it and that you don't have any legal issues? So like on liabilities, it's not something that we necessarily need to be attuned to, because by definition, if it's on the agenda, you've reviewed it and kind of approved it from a legal perspective?
We have reviewed it. We don't have any issues with it. Just as a reminder, we don't make policy because we're not elected or appointed officials. We only tell you what the legal implications of a policy might be, or if there are certain statutory requirements that a policy has to have. For example, your policy for AB 2449, there are certain requirements that need to be included with respect to that. But yes, if it's come from policy committee, or if it's on the agenda, it has gone through legal review.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was an excellent question, Director Deschler. Now let's move on to our report from General Manager.
I think Sydney will go first on some things and then.
All right, so we are continuing our cliff erosion and safety campaign. Our last post showed a video of a party on a balcony taken from a helicopter. We interviewed IVCSD Patrol and included some pretty heart-wrenching testimonials from them. And then we also honored the lives lost and put a call out for anyone impacted by a cliff fall who might want to share their story. So our next post will be on Monday, probably Tuesday with the holiday, but it's focused on do's and don'ts around the cliffs and safety and community resources. We're also working with AS to get cliff safety added to UCSB's orientation for all students, because after our most recent post, we learned that a number of people weren't even aware that people had fallen, let alone passed away from a cliff fall. So that was really eye-opening. We are also creating a flyer to pass out to all Oceanside houses prior to Deltopia, and we'll put posters in dorms and safety info. Next week, on Tuesday, the 21st, we are partnering with AS to host another lighting walk. We'll meet here in the community room at 6:30 for a brief training and then head out in groups. We have some community stakeholders coming in, including Supervisor Katz. So if anybody here wants to attend, I definitely encourage you to. The Compost Collective is hosting a community mural painting event this Friday, the 17th, from 1 to 3 at St. Michael's Church. They're going to be painting their compost piles. So I encourage you to attend that as well. And lastly, we have partnered with Santa Barbara Resource Network to provide psychological first aid training in IV for service providers next week, which will also be held in this room. We hit capacity for that super quickly, but we are offering 2 other opportunities in April and May.
And then Jenna, do you want to talk on your things? I'll share the screen. You'll be able to
Yeah,
create some
so
great accomplishments.
Isla Vista Beautiful, we're working on the yard sale for March 11th. We're hiring, and I just wanted to share a couple pictures. So a property management company reached out to us about the squid mural that's on Sueño, and it had been, a lot of graffiti was on it. They had covered it up with white and it kind of ruined the mural. So my team has been working to restore it, and here's some before and after photos. It's not done yet, but it's very close to being done. But I think it's looking really good from how it used to look. And then we're also working on beach entrances. So here is a before and after of a couple of the signs that are at the beach entrance on the 6-5 block. And as well as the wood, we've painted over the graffiti. See, that's the before, that's the after. And then there's one more before and after. And we are going and hitting all the other beach entrances also. That's it for me.
And we're working with county parks on that, so they're fully aware. And then we got a request from some students who want to put up more signs like water quality testing at that.
Certified.
Some other things that are going on. Yeah, thank you, Director Brand, for mentioning the safety station was a very popular announcement at Hillel when we mentioned that it was going to be coming soon. So we're going to be doing that very soon. I attended a roundtable event at UCSB last week that was about services for survivors of sexual violence. So I was going there to mainly, partner. We have a service for survivors here. I was able to sit with Tessa and we got to talk about things. And I was just listening out for what services could we fund and incorporate that would be a temporary replacement or an addition to what we were doing with the investigators. So nothing came up then, but I did put it out that we are, we have limitations in what we can do, but we want to do something more. We delayed the rental housing mediation program annual report from this meeting because it's 9:45 at this point with the agenda we had. So catch it next time, but I'll say look out for a Nexus article that's going to be promoting the program. The Nexus is very interested in promoting it, and we are connecting with IVTU to have more referrals to us. So referrals, like I've mentioned, have been the #1 way for the program to now work. It's where it hit its stride. So we are looking forward to that. We met with general services from the county to go over their list of projects and construction for the Ivy Community Center and for this building. And the theme of today, I guess, has been ADA. So their main projects are going to be ADA improvements for this building, for the community center, and connecting the sidewalk, the public sidewalk, to here, because it's pretty much impossible to walk from the sidewalk to this building if you have mobility needs. So that's the main focus. And then after that's done, other projects will be done. And so it'll be like a 1 to 2 year, minimum 1 year. And that's going fast. So up to 2 years of construction projects at the community center. You got the big update on STEP today. And for parking, our consultants continuing to bug us to get started. We still haven't heard back from UCSB, the Vice Chancellor's office over that area. So I've bugged a bit, but trying to figure out something we can do to move this forward. But that's where we're at with parking. Good update on community gardens. During the same meeting where we had the construction projects, we went over them. We got a verbal preliminary approval to get the new location for the garden that we had in front of the clinic. So we just have to finish up conversations with our neighbors, like the clinic and IVRPD, but that garden site was really welcomed when we mentioned it to the county. And retreat, we are looking for a date in March that would work for everybody, hopefully. If not, we will go into early April. But now that we have a full board again, I was looking at March 11th or 25th, and I'll send out a doodle poll to our board members to fill that out and see what we can do. And then our finance committee will meet soon on schedule towards the end of February, so that we will have to schedule a meeting, and then we'll get started in earnest on our budget process. That's everything. Oh, and it was mentioned we're meeting with our county supervisor on Thursday.
Yes. All right, thank you for that report, Jonathan. The next regular meeting of the Board of Directors will take place February 28th, 2023 at 6 p.m. on Zoom and at the community room, 970 Embarcadero Del Mar, Isla Vista, California. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Mr. Freeman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Scholes. Jonathan, can I have a roll call?
Director Brett,
Yes.
Director Freeman,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Craig,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Daschler. South. Let's go.
All right, we are adjourned.
Long one today. Thank you.